From the studios at Emerson College in Boston, EIV News presents Election 2016.
Hello and welcome to EIV News Presents Election Special 2016. I'm Maddie Crichton.
And I'm Shayna Ferreira, bringing you the latest in live election night coverage of this historic presidential race to the White House. Now, the news of the last hour.
Hillary and Donald Trump have both already voted, but ironically enough, Trump's son and main surrogate Eric Trump's vote may not count after he posted a picture of his ballot on social media. Sharing your ballot is illegal in New York along with 18 other states, and quote, "Vote will float" is NASA's motto as they yet again have an astronaut voting from outer space.
That's right, and those states on the East Coast whose polling locations at 7 and close at 7 and 8 o'clock rather are starting to release their result. Trump is leading with 60 electoral votes to Clinton's 48. Now, the Senate is currently looking good for the Democrats as they are leading with 40 to 37 seats. Now, this can also mean for the House, however, that they can remain in control in terms of 70 to 45 seats. Now, it looks like it's going to be a long night before this particular election is called. North Carolina, arguably one of the 6 most important states of the election, is extending voting times by 20 to 60 minutes due to technical difficulties. It might be a long time before the state is actually called, that it had to change from electronic to paper ballots.
Well, it's definitely going to be a long night if battle states like North Carolina are going to extend voting times, because those states can really make or break this election.
Absolutely. I mean, you have some analysts saying that those couple states like North Carolina, and even states like Pennsylvania and Florida, those can really, count this election for either candidate. So it's really important that we get those accurate counts.
Yes, both candidates definitely need to win it. For more on what the candidates have to do to reach the necessary 270 electoral college votes to win, we now go to EIV's Paul Ross, who's breaking down those numbers. Paul. Yes.
Right now we've got Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, South Carolina, all going to Donald Trump. No surprises there. We've got Washington, D.C., we've got Maryland, we've got Delaware, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Vermont, all going to Hillary Clinton. Now, at this hour, since a lot of polls just closed, we can add New York, Hillary Clinton's home state, to the Democrats. We also have Illinois, Hillary Clinton's state where she was born, can go to the Democrats. We also have North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Kansas, all going to Donald Trump. So Hillary Clinton has 97 electoral votes right now, Donald Trump with 84. Back to you guys.
Great. It's definitely going to be a close race that we have to be watching out for. It is, a lot of those states are. It's going to be, we have Florida not come in yet, North Carolina not come in yet, Ohio hasn't come in yet, and polls in those states are actually not even looking the way we anticipated. Ohio could be leaning towards Clinton, and we thought it could be more safe for Trump. So definitely something that we need to be keeping an eye on, keeping track of.
Right, absolutely. And even looking toward North Carolina, I mean, Clinton ahead by 66,000 votes. I mean, that's a make or break state right there. I mean, what do you think? I mean, where can that go for Trump?
I think that, it's been one of the most, polling has been at points, even. It's been a dead tie. And Trump does need that state to win. Whereas, Hillary, if you do look at some polling, she can go without North Carolina and still get 270. But Donald Trump, it's going to be harder for him to make it to that number. Without getting the 270 votes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Keeping it going.
Great. So we are now going to toss to a live hit with our reporter over in New York. Take it away.
Ross Ketchke here for EIV News.
Aaron Crowley.
We are standing here in Washington Square Park in New York City, and one of 2 days it has been covering this campaign so far. Today in New York, but last night and yesterday in our nation's capital of Washington, D.C.
A wonderful day we had in Washington yesterday. I was up at the Washington Monument talking with Hillary Clinton supporters about why they're with her.
And now that being her major campaign slogan from pretty much day one, what were bringing her supporters and her voters out to the polls to stand with her?
Hillary has had a solid support team behind her for pretty much her entire race. race. And these people are really focused on her health care plans and her immigration reform.
Of course, and both of those major subjects being the cornerstones of both major parties' campaigns. Donald Trump, of course, starkly different on immigration. His cornerstone, building that wall between the U.S. and Mexico, a highly controversial topic for him, and as also cutting Obamacare on the healthcare side, Obamacare being arguably one of the biggest accomplishments of Barack Obama's 8 years in office. But moving away from the presidency for just a moment, back in studio, you all hit on the important Senate races going on, and those definitely having a major weight across the nation as well.
Absolutely. We're going to look at North Carolina. Their incumbent Republican senator was not expected to win again because the Republicans were worried that he wasn't running a strong enough campaign to be reelected.
Of course, and then down in Florida, another major win for the Grand Old Party, as at one point presidential hopeful Marco Rubio retains his Senate seat. Now, all these races are still far too close to call, but here in New York, Hillary Clinton taking that, as well as back home in Massachusetts for you guys in Boston. But we're going to go back to you in the studio now. For EIV News, I'm Ross Ketchke.
And I'm Aaron Crowley.
Live in New York, back to you at the desk.
And now for why your vote matters, here is reporter Ross Ketchke. Ross?
Ross Ketchke here for EIV News in Washington, D.C. As the final hours of this election tick down, we're reminded of the freedom and democracy that helped define America. Behind me, one of the greatest symbols of that democracy, the Washington Monument, celebrating the father of our country. But this election has called into question, what exactly does your vote count for? How does the Electoral College work? And does your vote for the next president really matter? Here's our brief description of the functions of the Electoral College, its history, and how it affects your vote for the next president of these United States. The Electoral College is a process, not a place. The Founding Fathers established it in the Constitution as a compromise between the idea of a president being elected entirely by Congress or entirely by the vote of the popular citizens. Each state is allotted a fixed amount of votes. It's all about that magic number, 270. That's the amount of Electoral College votes it takes to win a candidate the presidency. States are granted one vote for each member of the House of Representatives they have in Washington, as well as one for each senator. Each state has different laws on exactly how those electorates are chosen, but generally they're selected by each candidate's party. And while most states are winner-take-all, meaning the majority winner in that state receives all of its votes, both Maine and Nebraska distribute their votes proportionally. So, although your vote does not exactly get counted in one big pile with everyone else's, your vote does matter. Your vote influences the electorates from your state to vote for the candidate that you support. And remember, whether you live in a red state, a blue state, or a swing state, your vote does matter, and perhaps matter this election more than it ever has before. I'm Ross Ketchke, EIV News in Washington, D.C.
Thank you for that report, Ross. Now here to discuss, we have reporters Brian Daniff and Carly Wickham. Swing states, Florida, North Carolina. What if there is a tie? What do you think will happen in the, in the Electoral College? How will America even react to that kind of happening,
Well, I know in this election, because it's been so tumultuous the whole time, a lot of people are saying my vote's not going to count. But in swing states, especially Pennsylvania, especially Florida, every single vote does count. As we saw in the Bush-Gore election, that election was chosen by, less than 500 votes, or about 500 votes. So every single vote can decide which electoral candidates are going to go which way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The most important thing that I think has been talked about this election is that your vote matters. It matters so much. Voting in this country cannot be taken for granted. Many countries do not have that luxury. So, look, these swing states are very important. If you want a certain candidate to win and you live in a swing state, you need to be at the polls. You need to be in line. This is an important election. Every election is important, but this one especially really will define what America's future is.
Thank you so much. And now let's go to reporter Ross Ketchke again for a look at Trump's win in New Hampshire, see what happened in those primaries.
Ross Ketchke here for EIV. I'm standing in Manchester, New Hampshire, where Donald Trump just gave his victory speech after winning the New Hampshire primary today. He scored an impressive 33 points in the polls, doubling the first runner-up, John Kasich, who scored just 16. We spoke with some Trump supporters as to why they turned out today in New Hampshire to show their support for the candidate.
Well, I think we really have to start over the way our whole political process works. We have a lot of political theater every budget season, every legislative season, and what I've been attracted to from the beginning is that Trump is just not wed to any special interest group. He's not wed to even the Republican machine, which has proven completely ineffective at getting stuff done for the last, my adult life, basically. So, I think he's going to bring a whole fresh perspective to Washington.
I think his health care policy that he's going to reverse Obamacare. I'm a nurse myself, and the Obamacare is not working. Nurses are losing their jobs. Hospitals are shutting down. Patients aren't getting the proper care. It's just not working.
We are going to make our country so strong. We are going to start winning again. We don't win anymore as a country. We don't win on trade. We don't win with the military. We can't beat ISIS. We don't win with anything. We are going to start winning again.
I think that people are too sensitive these days. This whole Obama administration, we have to be so careful of what we say. I think it's ridiculous.
I like the fact that he's accomplished things in his life. A lot of people running for office these days, they just make speeches, they cast votes, they skip votes. I mean, that's why I don't respect Rubio, or Cruz. These guys are just grandstanders. Trump's actually accomplished some things with his life.
After losing to Ted Cruz in Iowa, this is Donald Trump's first big victory of his campaign. He now sets his sights to South Carolina on February 20th. For EIV News, I'm Ross Ketchke.
Thank you again for that, Ross. Here to discuss, we have political experts Yakub Halleck and Vincent Reno to discuss. So what do you think about the New Hampshire primary and the stakes it could set for this election? We had Trump winning by a landslide, Clinton losing by a landslide. Do you think that could predict how the votes play out tonight?
Sure. Well, the state of New Hampshire is actually very important this election cycle, especially with the tight races in Ohio as well as in Florida. You can expect that a lot of people will be watching what's happening in New Hampshire and see, if she's able to swing that state and build a wall against a possible defeat in Florida.
And what do you think about that, Yakub?
Well, I think that things changed much since the primaries, so I don't think this is going to be as effective as the primaries.
So you think Clinton definitely has a chance to come back from her loss and sort of beat out Donald Trump should everything go according for her?
It's possible, but some say that he is going to win because, statistically speaking, he's winning in New Hampshire.
Right, the polling does show.
Far,
the polling has been very tight, though. So do you think there is a chance for Clinton?
Yeah, well, of course, there's always a chance, but in such cases, usually the chance is more for Trump because there are many people that were not saying that they're going to vote for Trump. So therefore, there are those hidden Trump voters that are not talking to the pollsters.
Mm-hmm.
So
and what about hidden Clinton voters? Do you think there are hidden Clinton voters, people that may not want to admit, sort of just like how Trump has people that may not want to admit this?
Sure. Well, yeah, there's something that we call the Bradley effect back in Los Angeles with the first African mayor, where the people responding to different polls changed the way in which the polls are reported in the election. So obviously, I'm pretty sure there's some people that won't admit that they're voting for Donald Trump, but at the same level, I mean, I'm pretty sure some voters won't admit that they're voting for Hillary Clinton. So we'll see what happens. But so far, the polls have been fairly reliable in past election cycles. So I expect that the polls will be reliable this election cycle as well.
But even for as far as New Hampshire, I mean, a lot of people consider New Hampshire to be kind of like New England's swing state, and a lot of that can be determined based on policies of both of the candidates. Now, a strong suit of Clinton that she's been sort of criticized and also admired for is her strong debate performances and how she kind of communicates what she will do, as opposed to Trump, who has, again, less experience, but he still manages to kind of come off as a very simple put forward person on terms of policies. And do you think that in and of itself will stretch out in terms of the polls tonight?
Well, what I find really interesting about the messaging, and you're talking about the messaging here, what's very interesting is that Donald Trump has been very strong when it comes to the format of the messaging. It's been a message that's very simple. So when you ask somebody what's the positions of Donald Trump on specific issues, they're actually able to, articulate the message. The message was for the Clinton campaign, for example. A lot of people have a hard time articulating her positions on, for example, abortion rights or on immigration. So the formatting is very interesting. However, on the content, the Donald Trump campaign has some issues with the content. I mean, some of the content of his message has been perceived as, not necessarily in line with what some people are thinking about in the United States. So we're seeing sort of different issues where whether it's the format or the content of the different messages.
And as far as messaging goes for the Clinton campaign, she has had a lot of people on the ground, Elizabeth Warren, Barack Obama, all going to New Hampshire. Do you think that's helped with her messaging over there?
Oh, certainly, yes, because they both are popular in New Hampshire, and that must have helped. And they're from, I mean, Warren is from a neighboring state, and she could appeal to the ultra liberals. So I think it would help with certain voters, yes, for sure.
Great, thank you so much. We now have a live reporter, Moses Small. He is in the swing state of New Hampshire. Moses, what do you have for us? Oh, hold on, Moses. Actually, we do have some difficulties. We're going to go to maps instead. We have Paul Ross with an update. Arkansas did just go to Trump, so let's see how that is going to play out for now.
Tell us, Paul.
So we've got Texas right now. Texas is one of the larger states that's going to the Republicans, Donald Trump, and we just got Arkansas that goes to Republicans, the home state of Bill Clinton. And as we add Wyoming onto the board. So right now, Donald Trump is leading 129 to 97. Nothing really out of the ordinary so far for the Republicans and the Democrats. States that we're going to be looking for later on. Michigan. So far, Hillary Clinton is leading at 16 electoral votes. It would be very important for the Democrats that they could hold on to that. We've also got Ohio. Now, Hillary Clinton is leading in that state. However, polls have shown that Donald Trump could possibly win that. That's 18 electoral votes. It's very important. We've got Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes, all neighboring states. Very important to see who wins that state. And of course, the big one, Florida, 29 electoral votes. Not the largest, but Florida, since it's a swing state and it could go any direction. There's so far 91% reporting in the state, and we don't know yet who will win that state. So far, nothing too surprising on the board. Back to you guys.
Great, so no swing states in yet. We are definitely waiting for the swing states. We currently have Christina and Dylan here with us to discuss the polling right after we go to the live hit with Moses Small in the swing state of New Hampshire.
Moses, what do you have for us?
Thank you. So what we have right now is a recap on an extremely dynamic race for the Senate. We have Maggie Hassan and we have Kelly Ayotte, and it's contentious because Kelly Ayotte served as a governor from 2004 to 2009, and Hassan is a current governor. And what we're seeing right now is a real flip-flop between voters preferring which experience they like more. And so a lot of the voter dynamic is kind of mirroring what we're seeing in the general election right now. A lot of liberal voters are saying that they just don't like Kelly Ayotte, and the same thing goes vice versa for the Republican Party voters. And what we're seeing right now is just a lot of that. It's that people are championing their issues. We're hearing a lot about jobs. We're hearing a lot about manufacturing. And we're hearing that people really want to make these things come back. And so one of Kelly Ayotte's platforms that we've been hearing the most about on the streets here in New Hampshire is people talking about bringing manufacturing jobs back. And what we know about the latest polling is that Ayotte is favored to win, but that's really called into question by what we've seen here today because it's just so dynamic. What we're seeing is so back and forth that it's hard to tell that even though Ayotte is a preferred winner in polls such as Real Clear Politics, we really need to get these final results for ourselves until we really know what we're seeing. So for EIV News, I'm Moses Small.
Now, as most of this election process has been devoid of policy discussion, I analyzed for what a vote could mean for Hillary Clinton and for this nation. Let's see what policies Clinton claims she will create if she is elected president.
Hillary Clinton is no stranger to scrutiny, certainly in regard to her own rhetoric and the policies she would enact as commander-in-chief, beginning with the economy and American prosperity.
While many of you are working multiple jobs to make ends meet, you see the top 25 hedge fund managers making more than all of America's kindergarten teachers combined, and often paying a lower tax rate.
Clinton plans to launch jobs in infrastructure, research, and technology, making investments that she says would secure jobs and an economic future for generations. The campaign estimates that her plan would cost $275 billion over the next 5 years.
I want us to invest in you. I want us to invest in your future. That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business.
Her stance since the announcement of her campaign has been supporting the crippling middle class and continuing the progressive work that President Obama has started, with steps towards better access to health care for Americans that can't afford it, also known as Obamacare, or as she calls it, Hillary Care.
Number one, insurance companies can't deny you coverage because of a pre-existing condition. Number two, no lifetime limits, which is a big deal if you have serious health problems. Number three, women can't be charged more than men for our health insurance, which is the way it used to be before the Affordable Care Act. Number four, if you're under 26 and your parents have a policy, you can be on that policy until the age of 26, something that didn't happen before.
As the former secretary says, not only will she continue the work, but she will continue to uphold Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to choose.
I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions.
Another part of her policies include debt-free college for all Americans, with hopes of lowering the unemployment rate within her first year of office.
No student should have to borrow to pay tuition at a public college or university.
The plan would cost $350 billion over the next 10 years. Republicans have criticized Clinton's plans as a socialist move that would cripple the American economy. Under her policies, she says the tax loopholes will cover the cost of her plans.
So let's have paid family leave, earned sick days. Let's be sure we have affordable child care and debt-free college. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it by having the wealthy pay their fair share and close the corporate loopholes.
On the issue of immigration, within the first 100 days of office, Clinton says she would propose a package that would offer a pathway to citizenship for the undocumented in the country.
And you're right, I don't want to rip families apart. I don't want to be sending parents away from children. I don't want to see the deportation force that Donald has talked about in action in our country.
Clinton has made clear her objectives for the middle class, but also for some of America's most vulnerable and often marginalized groups, including minorities. Plans for criminal justice reforms, common sense drug control, and bridging the gap between policing and communities, recognizing the issues of mass incarceration and concerns of the Black community. Clinton has also said she would uphold the rights of the LGBTQ community as equal citizens of the country by making federal strides for equity and also transgender rights, plans she has pushed for since her time in the Senate. Her progressive plans have been backed by a number of prominent Democrats, including President Obama, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and now Bernie Sanders. For EIV News, I'm Shayna Ferreira.
We're now joined in studio by Vincent Reynolds and Yakub Halak. Now, as far as her policies go, I mean, Hillary Clinton has been specifically kind of targeted from both the left and the right in regard to, kind of building off of the work that President Obama has done. And, some voters may consider this a lack of originality in her policies. For some voters, I want to see something different for the next 4 years. Do you think that her, or quote unquote lack of originality may hurt her in this election season?
Well, what you need to take into account is Barack Obama's level of popularity. As you know, he's been extremely popular, and I think she's trying to build off this popularity and really use that popularity to give a bit of a push to her campaign. However, you're right, some people have been, they're not really happy with so it's really a sort of a shot in the dark, whereas, she can, build off the momentum that Barack Obama has. However, they could have some negative impacts with those that are not really happy with how things are going.
Do you see that as an advantage for Clinton?
Yes, certainly, because she wants to appeal to the Obama coalition, such as the African Americans, the Latinos, even Asians. And for her to do that, she could be accused by Trump and others as running for a third Obama term. But like you said, Obama is very popular right now, so
yes.
She could do that.
Do you think this election has anything to do with Obama's popularity? Because right now he is, he's got a really, really great approval rating, but he has had points where, it's been incredibly low. So do you think the election has to do with why all of a sudden we're like, Obama's doing a great job, he's doing a great job campaigning and partaking in this democracy?
Yes, certainly, especially because the kind of population she's trying to target, the ones that are going to vote for her no matter what. Obama is very smart in going out there to say, go and vote, it's my legacy, you want to protect my legacy and all that stuff. So they've been running an excellent campaign in that sense, and they've been winning.
But a lot of, in terms of kind of communicating that message, I mean, Trump, even though, he hasn't necessarily had this lavish political history, he's able to sort of communicate a simple message to his base. Whereas Clinton, even though she kind of boasts on the fact that she kind of has this policy that's available for anyone to look at, it's not as easily communicated. Is this to her advantage in this particular race, or is it to her disadvantage?
Well, that must be a disadvantage for sure.
Right.
I should say.
I would actually say that Donald Trump's message is easily understandable, and it translates well to social media as well, right?
Right.
I mean, his policy proposals can be easily fitted in 140 characters that are published on Twitter. And more importantly, Trump has been really good at using Twitter to shape the media coverage. So you've seen a lot of media organizations dedicating an entire news cycle to just a tweet, which is really a good way for Donald Trump to be able to control the media coverage and to have his message, which is simple, reach everybody.
Great. Thank you so much. And votes just keep coming in. Now that votes are closed for half the polls in the country, we're going to go back to Paul Russ for a look at what the electoral map is right now. Paul? Actually, we're going to go to Christina Gesford coming out of New York. She's got some updates coming from the heart of where so many things are happening. Christina.
Live from New York City, I'm Christina Gesford here at Now This headquarters. I'm joined by Sean Murrow. He is a political producer here at Now This. Sean, can you first tell me a little bit about what Now This is?
Absolutely. People your age, college kids, I'm only a little bit older, but still, will definitely recognize us from the videos you're seeing on your Facebook stream all the time. If you see some political video like, here's why Donald Trump said this and why it's wrong, and it has 30 million views, we probably made it. We're a completely socially distributed news company, so everything we make goes on Facebook or Twitter. We recently did bring back our website, but it's a very minor operation compared to, say, a CNN or a Huffington Post. It's all about distributing directly to Facebook and videos only.
All right, so social media has really impacted this election cycle. Can you tell me what that impact has been, especially here at Now This?
I think you can answer that in kind of a funny way, in that, say, like a Ted Cruz or a Jeb Bush. Their entire campaign was defined by, for lack of a better word, like memes. They were just, like, someone like Jeb was completely mocked. Like, what do you remember about Jeb Bush? You remember please clap, right? You don't remember his policies, you don't remember any of that. These two men were, and Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer. Ted Cruz looks like Kevin from The Office. They're completely defined by these things. And that's what companies like us choose to cover to a smaller degree, but I'd like to say that we didn't really consider what's going to go viral as why we cover it. We want to always cover the important stories.
So how is this election cycle different in terms of the impact of social media as compared to other seasons or other election cycles?
I think a candidate like Hillary Clinton has really embraced social media well with her like silly little delete your accounts things, and also just being able to, you've never been able to see inside the mind of a candidate the way you've been able to see inside the mind of Donald Trump through his 3 a.m. tweets. You didn't see Barack Obama tweeting at 3 a.m. Mean things about Ann Romney. You know what I mean? No one does that except for Donald Trump. So we're seeing that, and you're really opening up the mind of these candidates and seeing a personal thing beyond people sharing, say, a Bernie Sanders video.
So what kind of horizons are you hoping to reach? What people are you trying to reach, and what impact are you trying to make on them? I know you're trying to give a little bit more in-depth analysis into who they are and kind of make them a little more human, but how is this different than, like you were saying, CNN? Can you explain that a little more?
Well, we have a primarily millennial audience, and there are 69 million millennials of voting age this year, and that's enough to completely sway the election. So we've got millennials watching our stuff. We've got millennials that will say, watch our video, and it could possibly change how they vote. You guys are millennials. I'm a millennial. So we really have a grasp on this audience that a lot of the other traditional media outlets don't have. And millennials are going to decide this election if they show up.
That's true, and we are millennials here at Emerson College, so it was so great talking to you, Sean. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I'm Christina Gesford, live from New York City at the Now This headquarters. We're so excited to be here. Back to you guys in Boston.
Thank you very much. Now, we just got word from CNN breaking news here that Trump will take Texas and Arkansas. Now, Paul, do we see any major changes in those maps?
Yes, we can actually add another state. Yes, we can actually add another state to Hillary Clinton's total in addition to Donald Trump's totals in Arkansas and Texas. We could add Connecticut to Hillary Clinton. Not surprising, another New England state was going to go to Hillary Clinton anyways. So right now, for electoral votes, Hillary Clinton has 97 electoral votes. Donald Trump has 129. Now, if I want to go and take a look at a specific state and want to know where polling is, I got to go look at Florida. Florida right now is 94% reporting, and the reason why it hasn't been called yet is because of Polk County, right in the middle of the state. Polk County is in between Hillsborough County, which is where Tampa is, and Orange County, where Orlando is. That's 90% reporting, and it's going to Donald Trump by 55 to 41%. If Trump ends up winning that county, he'll end up winning the state, which is very important to him if he wants to win the presidency. Back to you guys.
Now, Texas is a really big state. What could this mean for Clinton? I mean, there was always talks of a potential swing towards blue, but I mean, we're clearly seeing here that it went red. What does this mean?
You know, Hillary Clinton has always been very popular with Southern Democrats. You saw that during the primary, where that was where she really clinched the nomination from Bernie Sanders. But when it comes to the general election, really Texas and a lot of those southern states like Louisiana, like Arkansas, were really always going to be Trump unless Hillary pulled out all the stops. We can see that with Texas going to Trump. It just wasn't the case.
Great. And, you know, there was times when the polling was closer in Texas. What do you think got that polling to be so close in such a red state?
Right, so because the state is very red, they do have some big cities, and that draws it blue for a lot of early polling. And then as we see, as the rural communities begin to come in, then we see it turn black to red.
Right. And even looking at some of those immigrant communities, I mean, you figure there's a really very large Hispanic community, especially, you know, Mexico being right there. Lots of immigration coming in, especially within the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, a lot of, you know, especially a lot of the polls were showing a greater turnout, especially for the Latino vote. But what does this say about the state of Texas in terms of their Latino vote and what that meant for the overall state of Texas, which is generally big in any general election?
I think that what we saw in Texas, even though it did turn red, as you were saying, the Latino vote has been so important, especially in all of the reporting about early states and how the Latino turnout has been so large. And I feel like once some of these swing states start rolling in, especially things like Florida, that's when we'll really see the impact of the Latino community. And I think that's going to be essential for Hillary to build her own coalition this time around to sink this election.
Right. And can you speak to the fact that the Latino early voting in Florida has been records high? What do you think is the cause of that? Is it Trump's campaign?
I think Trump's campaign, for one of the things he's saying, and I think as well the get out to vote movements. Hillary's really on the ground there, making sure that people are getting able to get to the voting locations, that they have registration available to them to make that happen.
You know, and a part of that, especially in terms of Trump and his reach in Florida and in states such as that, you see that his get out and vote campaign, it hasn't really reached the ground. I mean, he doesn't have the surrogates that Hillary Clinton has had. I mean, when you have someone like you know, even artists like Beyonce and Jay-Z, I mean, those particular figures, they have a say whether someone likes them or not. So you have, you know, what are Trump doesn't really have that surrogate base. Do you think that in and of itself will kind of decide those swing state majorities?
I think it'll absolutely be an influence. I mean, this election, Hillary's got the star power. You know, she has the pop stars surrogates like Beyonce, like Jay-Z, like Katy Perry, but she also has the political surrogate. She has people like Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama, all going out in droves. And I feel like that she's really trying to capitalize on that idea of we're stronger together. And I feel like that is one of the things that Trump's campaign lacks. He's done a very poor job of reaching out to some of the Republican congressmen and officials around the country who have tried to very adamantly distance themselves from him throughout this campaign. So he doesn't have those surrogates to be able to advocate for him in these swing states and just in the country in general, and it's been a failing of his campaign.
And if you look at some of Trump's surrogates, a lot of them are, you know, it's Ted Cruz, Chris Christie. You know, he was feuding with these people, you know, on debates online at some points. Do you think that has turned people away from wanting to be a surrogate for Donald Trump?
Yes, he's chosen very controversial people, and they all refer to him as a genius, and I think that word is a little triggering for many people. So he's kind of locked himself in a corner in that way with the people like Giuliani and Christie who are supporting him based on Bridgegate and things like that. So he's really in a tough spot. And in terms of on-the-ground support, I know Hillary has him outnumbered 100-1 in each state based on just like people getting out there campaigning for him door to door. So he really needs to get that infrastructure down if he wants to have this vote.
Right, and even in terms of just, you know, we've talked about kind of like the Latino turnout with early voting, even looking at African-American voters. I mean, the turnout record-wise in terms of early voting was actually lower this year. And, you know, that can speak to the campaign as it spoke to the campaign for the Latino vote. I mean, when he came out, of course, in his election announcement, already kind of offending that base with that, you know, Do you think that in and of itself is also a factor in this?
I think so, absolutely. And I think that for both Trump and Hillary, they chose very safe presidential nominees. They basically have like very plain white men to represent them as a VP, kind of a Joe Biden-esque kind of person, which I think will actually hurt them now in the election.
Great. Thank you so much. We actually now have Jeff Santos, host of the Jeff Santos Show, Skyping in with us to discuss some of the issues in this campaign, in this election. What is your take on these issues, Jeff?
As people are pretty nervous tonight in the Clinton campaign, the numbers right now are there for Mr. Trump. Of course, he has to win a lot more, but he's ahead in Florida.
We are going to get to Jeff in just a second, some issues with his show timing right now. So let's continue talking about the surrogates on the campaigns on the field. Trump, again, like we said, doesn't have a lot, but, there are still states that are going for him. What is the momentum? What is driving his momentum in those states?
I think it's just the people who are supporting him then create his infrastructure. So he doesn't necessarily have his campaign going out there, but he has people. It's like a person-to-person kind of thing, where like if your family's voting for Trump, then you're voting for Trump. And I think that really creates that community there for him.
We'll be talking with her.
Great, thank you. We are going to now try again to toss to Jeff Santos. Jeff, what is your take on Clinton surrogates versus Trump surrogates and how they are influencing this election?
How you doing, Jessica?
We're doing well. Maddie and Shayna here. We are doing so well. Thank you so much for joining us. We've just been discussing some surrogates for Clinton and Trump, and how do you think they are influencing this election?
Well, it's going to be interesting because they have done, I think the Clinton folks have done a very good job on television and on radio appearances. I think the question now is, are they going to be able to sort of keep a lot of Democrats who are probably very nervous right now as you look at the map. Mr. Trump is ahead in Florida, still close to call. He's ahead in Ohio, ahead in Michigan. And those are states that I think the Clintons anticipated they would win. Now, of course, things could change. But a lot of that work of those surrogates is to sort of keep people, from jumping out of their chairs or jumping out of the windows. And I think they will be able to do it. But this of course, is how they have been able to offset all the WikiLeaks problems, how they've been able to sort of deal with the email issue as a whole. I think the surrogates have done a pretty decent job.
And how about the surrogates on Trump's side? So we see them, like you said, not out as much. Yeah, they have not done as good of a job as Clinton has. But right now we do see him leading in states like Ohio and Florida. What do you think that says about the Trump campaign?
Well, I think that, they have done a lot of work behind the scenes. The Trump family, of course, has a place in Palm Beach County, so they're not strangers to Florida by any stretch of the imagination. And Florida, as we all know, has been a state that is trending Democratic, but it has Republican, going Bush twice in 2000, even though that was a little hanky-panky there with his former brother, the governor. And again in 2004, when he won a little bit more handily against John Kerry. So it's not a surprise. It's why it's, the swing state of all the swing states. I think that this could be one of these late nights. It could be early mornings because this is a state. There's a couple of counties out. A couple of our polling friends have talked about a couple of counties that, could go down to the single digits. So we could be in for a long night, Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, Trump's policies have been controversial within the GOP due to his discrepancies with the Republican Party. Let's go to reporter Christina Gesford to see what policies a vote for Trump would bring to the country.
They're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Trump's campaign has been ridden with media coverage of his incendiary comments, so much so that his policies seem to fall by the wayside. At a recent speech given at Gettysburg, Trump outlined his first 100 days as president in his, quote, contract with the American people. The candidate has set lofty goals for himself for his first day in office, proposing 18 legislative actions that he would immediately undertake.
It's my privilege to be here in Gettysburg, 100 days after the election, to speak to you about the 18 legislative actions that I will immediately undertake. 100 days after the election, 18 legislative actions that I will immediately undertake. 100 days after the election, 18 legislative actions that I will immediately undertake. It's my privilege to be here in Gettysburg hallowed ground where so many lives were given in service to freedom. Amazing place.
Many of Trump's proposed policy changes fall under a major theme of reworking American foreign relations. Trump pledged to back out of President Obama's proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership, cut billions in UN funding to prevent climate change, and label China as a currency manipulator.
They hire other people. They then take their air conditioners, their cars, whatever they're making, they send it tax-free across what will be a very strong border, believe me. But they send it tax-free across the border, and what do we end up with? We have unemployment, tremendous losses, and we have none of the benefits.
At home, Trump also has a number of legislative acts he wants to undertake on day one. Making good on his promise to reshape the federal government, Trump intends to propose a constitutional amendment that puts term limits on all members of Congress. He will also issue a freeze on all federal employee hiring, as well as begin the process of deporting over 2 million undocumented criminal immigrants.
We're going to suspend immigration from terror-prone regions where vetting cannot safely occur.
Among Trump's more ambitious goals is the defunding of sanctuary cities, which would include some of America's largest cities. Trump also plans on canceling what he calls, quote, every unconstitutional executive action issued by President Obama.
Politics. On November 8th, Americans will be voting for this 100-day plan to restore prosperity to our country, secure our communities, and honesty to our government. This is my pledge to you. And if we follow these steps, we will once more have a government of, by, and for the people. And importantly, we will make America great again. Believe me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emily Tanaka. Now we're going to be joined by our analysts in just a moment. But first, we want to toss to Paul Ross, who has an update on the electoral maps. Thanks.
All right, so here's what we got as far as states go right now. We've got Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia all going to Donald Trump for 137 electoral votes, 49%. For the Democrats, Hillary Clinton has 104 electoral votes, 47% popular vote. She's got Illinois, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. So, I want to go talk about Florida for a little bit. Florida is at 94%. There hasn't been really move in polling. And as far as the state goes, the middle part of the state is the most important part because it's got such a mixed background of new people coming into the state and older residents. And the middle county, Polk County, is very important because so far it is going to Donald Trump, but it's not complete yet. However, he is leading the state by 2%. Therefore, if this continues to go the way it's going right now, Florida will go to Donald Trump, which will be a huge advantage for him going forward in this election. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much. And here to talk a little bit about how things are shaping out as far as the maps are going and even a little bit of Trump policies, we have Yakub Halleck and we have Vincent Reno. So what do you think about some of the Trump policies? We just saw a package from Emily Tanaka, how they have kind of fell to the wayside in Trump's campaign. How do you think he's sort of made an effective campaign without policy being in the limelight?
Well, he was promoted by the mainstream media because they were making some money. There are certain leaks that show that the Hillary Clinton campaign actually did want to promote him at first and then bring him down. And he has star power. And each time he talked and attacked Mexicans, attacked whomever, he just changed the way we look at campaigns anymore because he was getting many more people following him and his rallies and everything. Each time he was as absurd as most of what, as absurd as the things that he was saying, more absurd people and otherwise were following him. So it worked, and the news media loved it. And Hillary Clinton loved it initially. Maybe they didn't want someone else, such as Cruz or whoever, to win. And that's a big possibility. All we know that there are leaks that they really wanted to promote him.
Right. And as far as that promotion, I mean, we're looking at, Trump saying he wants to undo a lot of the work that President Obama has done in terms of, how would that, if he is elected president, how would that kind of impact with President Obama's current legacy?
That's a good question. I mean, a lot of the Trump discourse has been against what has been done by President Obama, but also by former President Bill Clinton. So there's a big appeal. And what's interesting is that Donald Trump's messaging really fits into this whole vision of the electorate that's sort of fed up with the elites, fed up with the political establishment. So by pushing against the policies that were established by President Clinton as well as President Obama, he's really tapping into a lot of resentment in the public, and really his message is really well received among some segments of the public.
Great. Thank you so much. Our EIV reporter Aaron Crowley went to Washington, D.C. to talk to Clinton supporters and see what makes them vote blue this election. Aaron, what is going on over in Washington, D.C.?
Aaron Crowley for EIV News. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and I'll be hitting the streets and several different monuments to find out why people are voting with Hillary Clinton.
I'm actually voting for her because she has points that she's standing on, what she's going to do for our country. And that's the most important thing. We have unemployment, we have more education as far as financial support for the students. We have a government that needs to be able to reach out across the country, across the nation, and sit at the table with other heads of state. And I think Hillary is the person that can do that. I don't see that in her opponent, so that's why I voted. I'm actually voting for her because she has points that she's standing on, what she's going to do for our country. And that's the most important thing. We have unemployment, we have more education as far as financial support for the students.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Aaron. So now over 80% of the electorate in Washington, D.C. is voting for Clinton. Like, this is a very, very high number. Even safe states don't go as high as 80. Why do you think D.C. is so far over?
Well, D.C. is one of those cities specifically that, it's kind of looked at as kind of this conservative base because we have so many kind of historical references there. But in reality, I mean, the city itself is extremely diverse. I mean, you have, a number of immigrants from all over the world that kind of become this melting pot into D.C. So, like, that definitely kind of impacts the polls in terms of what people are looking in terms of, what they want in a president or any specific leader in office. So that's definitely playing a part here.
Great, thank you so much. And in the event of a split Senate vote, the vice president does become the tiebreaker. So in the event that Clinton wins the election, knowing Tim Kaine becomes a lot more important. So let's take a closer look at his background. Tim Kaine joined Hillary Clinton's ticket in July, but he was part of the political spotlight long before then. Kaine won his first seat in public office in 1994, joining the Richmond City Council in Virginia. 4 years later, he became the city's mayor. In 2005, he was the governor of Virginia and held that position until 2010 when he went national as the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Tina Safford, president of Emerson College's Communications, Politics, and Law Association, thinks that climbing up from local to national politics boosts Kaine's credibility.
He is, again, very good at one-on-one personability, and then can kind of slip his policies into natural conversation, which is really a talent to have, whereas I feel like some politicians, and Hillary as well, she slips into like, I'm friendly, but then also here's my policy, whereas he can kind of balance them really well together.
While holding public offices, Kaine cut off state funding for abstinence-only education, enacted policies to reduce Virginia's carbon footprint, and oversaw changes in Virginia's gun policy requiring owners to go through a thorough background check. Considered a moderate Democrat, Kaine has an F rating from the NRA, a 91% from the League of Conservation Voters, and a perfect score from Planned Parenthood. Safford thinks his liberal policy is part of why Clinton chose him as a running mate and even increases her chances of winning.
I think that Clinton was very certain she's going to win in November, especially when she picked Kaine. He's a very safe choice.
he doesn't necessarily reach out to any certain demographic as other options for vice president might have. However, he has a very solid base, and he's very much a very likable candidate, and very much the same base as Clinton.
Safford even thinks that Kaine could one day run for president himself.
I think it really depends. I feel like once you're vice president, a lot of people, as we've seen in the past, don't really go on to being president after that, because you're kind of in that mode of being vice president where you're doing other things besides necessarily policy. But I do see it as a future. He's still like a young man in comparison to the rest of the ticket. So I think that he definitely has that as an option.
From his time as governor in Virginia to now as a candidate for vice president, Tim Kaine has taken on many roles as a politician, but we won't find out until tonight how they all pay off. For EIV News, I'm Maddie Creighton. We just saw a bit on Tim Kaine. Now let's take a look at Donald Trump's vice president, Mike Pence, who's been a very popular choice among the Republican Party. So popular that the GOP members such as Kelly Ayotte wrote his name on the ballot instead of Trump's. Let's go to Carly Wickham to learn more about his background.
Republican nominee Donald Trump surprised voters when he chose Indiana State Governor Mike Pence to be his running mate for the 2016 election. It appears Trump is trying to appeal to more conservative voters by choosing Pence, who many see as someone to balance out the campaign.
I think his main role in the campaign has been really being like the explainer for Donald Trump, the interpreter. When Donald Trump says something outrageous, which he does every other day, it's Mike Pence's job, him and other key figures in the Trump team right now, his campaign manager, people like Rudy Giuliani and all of that, to go out there and, tell the American people in public, that's not what he really meant. Let me completely reinterpret what he said so that it's more palpable to the American public. So I feel like he has had a tough time sort of defining his own unique message, because with someone like Donald Trump just sucking up all of the airwaves, it's hard for him to be able to do that.
The governor and former House representative, however, still holds himself to a high personal standard, describing himself as, quote, a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, in that order. Born and raised in Indiana, Pence attended Hanover College and the Indiana University McKinney School of Law, where his religious ties began. While attending school, Pence converted from Irish Catholic to become an evangelical Christian. Combined with his long history as a conservative politician, Pence has used his beliefs as input in many Republican-sponsored motions since he took office. In 2008, Pence was a lead opponent against the federal bailout as well as funding Hurricane Katrina relief efforts until the federal budget was cut. He also preached the sanctity of life by conducting a, quote, one-man crusade against Planned Parenthood since 2011. As Indiana governor, Pence is responsible for the largest tax cut in state history with a $1.1 billion giveback in 2013. In 2015, he signed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, allowing business owners of Indiana to deny service to people, primarily LGBTQ customers, for religious reasons. Before Trump clinched the GOP nomination, Pence openly supported Senator Ted Cruz, but chose to endorse the businessman after the Republican National Convention.
All right, well, we're now joined in studio by our reporter, Carly Wickham. Carly, now this is unprecedented in terms of, the selection for vice president for a candidate that's so, again, unprecedented like Donald Trump. Now, has Pence necessarily, voted across party lines legislations?
Yeah, well, I think recently everybody knows him as voting so strictly against Planned Parenthood, so strictly against anything really brought up liberal. But in 2009, he was one of the only Republicans to vote against the Wall Street bailout. So that is something that a lot of people might not expect coming from him. And in a few other ways, he has voted for liberal legislation in the past, though. Nothing recently, nothing that we can see in the Obama administration, though.
And what do you think Trump was looking for as far as qualities, characteristics, and even voting in a vice presidential nominee?
I think what we've seen a lot from Trump's campaign and from Trump himself is that he needs someone to kind of balance him out. So when he was looking for Pence, he was looking for someone who was more of a classical conservative politician, someone who went clearly with what the conservatives believe, someone who has been reliable voting for conservative legislation, and that's definitely Pence. Pence is, as conservative as they come down the block, yeah.
Now, there have been some discrepancies in terms of, the policies or the belief system between the two. Do you think that has affected the campaign in terms of their division?
I do think that has affected the campaign a lot. We've seen throughout the campaign trail and in their voting histories, the two men have disagreed a lot on various different policies. We saw for multiple different trade agreements, like the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, they definitely totally disagreed with their personal beliefs. So that has definitely caused some confusion and some division between the conservative and Republican parties, yeah.
Now, just looking kind of like at that Republican line, we're seeing like a lot of Republicans, a lot of prominent Republican families, like the Bush family, for example, won't endorse or won't support Trump. Now, do you think that he kind of used Mike Pence as kind of like a drawing point to kind of attract those that were sort of, hesitant to support him?
I think we can definitely say that. I mean, we know that Pence himself didn't support Trump when he first joined the campaign. He was all behind Ted Cruz. But I think showing that Pence can come around and back behind Trump 100%, it has helped some other conservatives get behind him as well.
And how do you think Pence compares to Kaine as far as kind of complementing and balancing out the ticket? As Kaine compliments Clinton, as Pence compliments Trump?
I think very well. I think both campaigns did a really good job making sure to help moderate voters or voters who are kind of undecided on either party lines. They need a more moderate, more kind of usual ticket for that campaign, yeah.
And do you think Kaine, he was on the short list of Obama's vice presidents in 2008. What do you think makes him so likable?
What makes Kaine so likable?
Yes.
Well, I think what makes Kaine likable is that he has kind of been behind this popular legislation. He is very outspoken, especially with issues that are important to millennials. He's always been behind Planned Parenthood. He's gotten backing from a lot of things, a lot of social issues that have been really important in this campaign in particular.
Even looking at, he's kind of also appealed to the more conservative liberals that we've been seeing in terms of his stance on like kind of protecting America domestically. You've seen him, he was on the campus of Virginia Tech after that horrible shooting. I mean, that in and of itself kind of appeals to the voter that's really for national security and kind of securing us as a nation, as opposed to other, more liberal policies or liberal standings. Do you think that also plays a factor in terms of kind of collecting a new base for Hillary Clinton?
Yes, I definitely do. I think the way that he goes about his liberal policies is in a very moderate way, a way that everyone can get behind, including what you mentioned with Virginia Tech. That's something that everyone can get behind, across party lines, across the aisle. That's something that's been important to everyone, especially during these, tumultuous times of the campaign. So I think he's definitely added to her pool behind her, yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Carly Wickham, who will be with us again later. Cyber hacks have added a new element to this election that voters have never seen before. Emily Tanakas investigates this new phenomenon. Emily, how has WikiLeaks impacted this election?
It's no surprise that presidential election campaigns are highly calculated, but the release of hacked emails from Clinton's campaign chair John Podesta provide the public an unintentional level of transparency. The emails were released by cyber activism group WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks is an organization to which people who have access to documents, primarily government documents, but often also documents from private organizations, who want to get those documents out in front of the world. They can give them to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks will put them up on the website, organize them.
The Podesta emails aren't the first case of WikiLeaks exposing the inner workings of the Democratic Party. On the eve of the Democrats' convention, the organization released emails from the Democratic National Committee, some of which showed party officials demonstrating a bias in favor of Clinton over primary candidate Bernie Sanders.
It's turned its focus in large part away from government whistleblowers contributing documents, or even private corporation whistleblowers. It's turned its focus more toward hacked documents and documents not from governmental agencies, or not from government, but from private organizations.
The hacked emails were attributed to Russian hackers in a statement from the Department of Homeland Security.
It would be unprecedented in modern times for a foreign government to, there's no other word, interfere or blatantly try to influence the results of American elections.
Russia's potential involvement may go beyond the presidential election and bring about more conflict. With the CIA reportedly planning a retaliatory cyber attack against the Kremlin, whoever wins tonight will have to deal with these new levels of digital influence.
All right, well, thank you so much for that, Emily. We're now going to Paul for more on what's going on with that map. What do you have for us, Paul?
All right, so what we have so far, we got no new updates on the states, but I just want to do a brief update on the state of Virginia. Now, in Virginia, Hillary Clinton is leading, but by a very, very slim margin, 92% reporting. She's leading by just over 6,000 votes. It was projected to go to Hillary there, but at the same time, it's been a battleground state, so we will see what will happen with that state. However, it is likely that Hillary will actually come out on top and win Virginia, which is a battleground state. And if she wants her campaign to go any further, she has to go and keep winning these battleground states. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. We're now joined in studio again by our wonderful political analysts here, Vincent Reyno and Yakub Halak. Now, again, we're looking at Virginia. We're looking at, CNN just projected Trump to take Montana. I mean, what do you make of these numbers?
There's clearly something that happened with the polling. I mean, a lot of the different pollsters were predicting that Hillary Clinton would be winning by a significant margin, and we're actually seeing that with some of the polls that the polls are actually the results are actually tighter than what the polls predicted. So it's really interesting to see how maybe we'll got to go back to the polling approaches and see why the polling is so off. What is actually happening.
And even looking at Virginia, I mean, you're seeing, Tim Kaine, who has a very long history with the state as a mayor, as a governor, and, now representing the state as senator, and even going on as, a vice presidential candidate. I mean, to see this tightness in this particular state, I mean, it kind of speaks to the hold that Trump has in terms of his base in that particular state. Now, does that speak to, Tim Kaine as a running mate in any particular way?
Not really. The reason she picked him is because he could give her Virginia and because he was a governor. And generally speaking, governors are more qualified than senators, and she's a senator. So she picked him for many other reasons, speaking Spanish, such things. He being a Catholic, she usually says, well, he's a Catholic, I'm not. So she picked him up because also he was on many committees. So she didn't just pick him because of Virginia, but that was one of the reasons she picked him up. So he might help her elsewhere, let's say with the Hispanics and such. It's not just Virginia. But that doesn't say too much, but that actually would say more about Trump, because the latest news is that Trump is doing very well in all those battleground states, and that's very scary to the Clinton campaign. So we do not know. We have to wait for 11 or 6 states: North Carolina, Ohio, Florida. He's doing very well in Florida. It's too close to call. Let's put it this way.
And for that too close to call, now Vincent, you're seeing this as well in terms of, the polling and, when you look back in terms of how they presented their policies, how, they kind of traveled in campaign for the last year and a half, it all came down to this. And if we're seeing this tightness, is that a reflection of the rest of the states? We're also waiting on, California, we're waiting on big states like Florida. Is that an indication moving forward?
Well, the tightness that we're seeing is really in the battleground states. Ohio has been for the get-go identified as a battleground state. So clearly in the battleground states, there's a tightness. I don't suspect that tightness will reflect itself in more, established, where, the Democratic presence is more established, like, for example, California. But there's clearly a tightness in the battleground states. But we also must say that in some of the Republican states, there's also some level of tightness as well. So we'll see what happens as the night goes on. But it's, exactly, the polls seem to be a bit off compared to what we're seeing in the results.
And what do you think of the demographics of some of these states where it is a swing? Florida has very concentrated populations in cities and then is a little bit, more, dispersed throughout the northern areas. How do you think that helps make it a swing state?
Sure. So what will be interesting to see is the turnout, the socio-demographic nature of the turnout, right? people in the rural areas, they're more turning out than people in sort of urban centers. So it's going to be really interesting to dive into whatever the results are. Just go back and really look at what was the turnout in the different segments of society and see how they impacted the results.
Great. Thank you so much, Vincent and Yakub. Coming up after the break, we go live to New Hampshire with reporter Moses Small. Stay tuned.
And we'll also have an interview with the third party nominee, Jill Stein. Stick around.
This is EIV News Election 2016. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and online at EIVnews.com.
That's going to do it for this episode of The Box Score. Thank you so much for joining us. We are now going to be taking questions at our press conference immediately. Tough show. It was a good show this week. Talent played well. Can't tell you the effect that Tommy had on us all the way up and down the rundown. Very impressed this week with the crew. Did all their work inside and outside of the locker room and inside the coaches' suites. I think we have a good chance next week against Syracuse before we take on Missouri. Then we'll get a little bit of a bye when we take on Ohio at the end of the month. But starting on the right, do we have any questions? Anything? Anyone in the middle? Anyone at all? Typical.
Oh, hello, Boston. Didn't see you there. Oh, are we rolling?
Get this game started!
Welcome back to EIV's election special. The New York Times has just indicated that Donald Trump has a 70% chance of winning the election. Now, polls never really indicated this. They got tighter as the race went on, but they never really showed a big lead for Trump. What do you think's happening tonight?
Well, definitely. I mean, we're seeing here like the Trump effect. A lot of people kind of, especially on Twitter, social media, has been saying this Trump effect is this, and it could mean at the social level, but also at the polling level. We're looking at a mass amount of the population that's sick of quote unquote politics as usual and sick of political correctness. And when it comes down to the polls, or maybe not as expressive, but it all comes down to the vote. And when you're seeing this mass number kind of swinging towards Trump, it could speak to the fact that he's speaking toward that level of distaste for political correctness. So that could definitely be a factor in this 70% that we're projecting here.
Right. And now, on the other hand, the 538.com has Clinton at a 70% chance of winning. How do two very notable, pollsters, very notable in polling and predicting elections, How come they have the exact opposite, do you think?
Well, again, there's another part of this Trump effect that's like kind of a double-edged sword we're seeing here. You know, we're looking at either a lack of political correctness, and we're looking at people that are fed up with the, you know, the offensive nature, you could say, of a Trump campaign, or what a lot of his surrogates have been saying about, minorities and different marginalized groups. So that is also part of this Trump effect that we're seeing. It's a double-edged sword, and it goes from the top to bottom on a social level, on a political level, and certainly on an economic level.
And I think it could also just come down to these battleground states, because in some cases we did think, Clinton has it for Ohio, for Florida, but now it's, we're backtracking those statements, and if, those votes do end up going to Donald Trump, those are a significant amount of electoral votes. Ohio with 18, Florida with 29, it really, really does eat into what we predicted for Clinton.
Right, and you're looking at those liberal states kind of coming in, but we're also waiting on those Midwestern states. So now it's only time will tell. We're going to see what this election goes to in terms of the Electoral College.
Yes, and one of the reasons that swing state Pennsylvania has yet to be called could be due to Lebanon County. Programming malfunctions caused Republican straight ticket votes to register as a Democratic vote. We're going to now toss to Paul Ross to see how this is going to affect the electoral maps.
So right now we're going to show you the results of Wyoming. Donald Trump ended up winning this state. It's not really surprising. Wyoming is a very conservative state. It's got a very small population. It's only 3 electoral votes. However, we've got some battleground states that we got to get through first. So we've got Wisconsin and Michigan, both states that are right now going towards Donald Trump. However, we've got Florida that's also going to Trump. We got Georgia right now going to Trump. We got North Carolina going to Trump. We've got New Hampshire going to Trump. Donald Trump is doing very well early on. Same thing with Ohio. And you got Arizona. Now, where Clinton is doing decently well in battleground states, we've got New Mexico, Colorado, Iowa, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maine, all right now leading for Hillary Clinton. Back to you guys.
All right, now let's check in with reporters Ross Ketchke and Emma Sin in New York. How's it looking, guys?
All right, we're gonna get numbers.
What?
Kate.
Going up now?
Welcome back to EIV, live here in New York City. I'm Ross Ketchke.
And I'm Erin Crowley, and we are live here in West Manhattan. We are 1 block away from the Javits Center, where Hillary Clinton is holding her election night rally here in New York.
That's right. Now, if you look behind us, New York Police Department has actually blocked off this end of West 34th Street with a heavy police cruiser presence as well as dumpster trucks. We saw a very similar sight earlier this afternoon at Donald Trump's tower in central Manhattan. The New York Police Department tasked with an enormous duty of securing Manhattan tonight as both presidential candidates are here in the city.
Absolutely. They have a lot of ground to cover. Both candidates are confirmed in New York tonight, and they have a lot of things to look out for.
That's right, absolutely. The NYPD doing a phenomenal job here tonight. Now, of course, throughout this election season, we've heard so many stories of both protests and rallies for both of these candidates having issues of violence inside arenas as well as outside. And the New York Police Department certainly has a lot on their hands tonight. Now, earlier this afternoon, outside of that Donald Trump tower, we saw many protesters, dozens showing up to support the candidate, but a fairly equal number also there to protest. Luckily there, we did not see any instances of violence. Everything was rather peaceful, as it is here in New York this evening. We're hoping to see that continue throughout the night.
Yeah, we're seeing supporters walking by with a Trump flag or in the Hillary pantsuit. Things are peaceful here in New York tonight.
That's right. Now, as we stand on the corner of the street here in New York, every person passing by is interested. Everyone's plugged into their phones. What's happening with the election? This certainly could be the story. It certainly is the story of the year, possibly even the story of the century. And as the results continue to come in, we'll have the latest news for you. That is all we have for you here from 10th Avenue and West 34th in Manhattan. For EIV News, I'm Ross Ketchke.
And I'm Erin Crowley.
Back to you at the desk.
Great, thank you so much, Ross. We have some more stuff from Paul Ross on new states coming in. Missouri, New Mexico have just had polls closing and results coming in. Paul, what does this all mean as far as the votes? Who's going to get to 270 first?
Well, it's not really that surprising that New Mexico has gone for Hillary Clinton. New Mexico, 5 electoral votes, 52% to 37%. And then we've got Missouri, another state that was one of the better states for Hillary Clinton. It's actually going to Donald Trump. Now, Missouri is a very conservative state. It's one of the southern states, but also a lot of people in that state consider it to be more northern. So with Ferguson riots, a lot of people A lot of the white people in the state decided to go and vote for Donald Trump through a lot of fear. Therefore, Missouri going for Donald Trump is not really that surprising. It's 10 electoral votes. Donald Trump keeps racking up more and more states. Very surprising. And back to you guys.
Great. So let's take a look at what does this all mean. We're joined again by Dylan and Christina. Right now CNN predicts right now no one getting to 270 with so many states still unclear. They have Clinton at 268, Donald Trump at 204. Did you guys think the night was going to shape up like this with so much in the air?
I did not at all. I think that a lot of us thought the night was going to be over very quickly, that Hillary Clinton was going to kind of sweep the East Coast and we were just kind of going to wait for everything to happen in the Midwest. But this is going to be a very tight night. I don't think anyone's going to sleep for a long time.
Yeah. What do you think of all this, all these tight races, too close to call?
I mean, I think most of us were hoping for the best, but given this election year and everything that's happened so far, it makes sense that at this point we're still biting our nails and holding our breath to see what will happen.
Now,
Yeah.
we kind of talked about this before, but that 70%, that's something that, Democrats have not expected. And even some Republicans that have backed Trump have not expected. What does that say about the state of the race?
I think a lot of people acted as if, people were still going for Trump, but they didn't really understand that he actually could win this and had a fair chance. So I think now the reality is setting in that he actually could take this, and with a huge margin, a relatively big one. So I think a lot of people are being like, oh my goodness, how are we going to handle this, and actually what's going to happen in the future if Hillary does not have it?
Mm-hmm.
And as students with experience in CPLA and polling, how do you think polling might have missed a few of these states?
I think that one of the things that probably wasn't as accounted for in a lot of the polling was just the breadth of support that Trump did have, especially since a lot of polling is done voice to voice. Many people, given the negative perception Trump has in the media, were probably afraid to convey their actual political beliefs in these polling. So I feel like there's a large number of people who either didn't answer these polls or weren't honest in these polls, and I think most of those people were Trump supporters.
Well, in looking at those particular polls, you're seeing that, especially from a liberal side in terms of the East Coast, a lot of people that may have backed Trump but weren't as open about it. That's part of this Trump effect that we're looking at. Many people don't want to admit that they would back Trump for whatever particular reason, whether it be because their candidate pulled out from the primary. But do you think that also speaks to this? We've kind of just touched on that with the polling a little bit, but in terms of the polling in these kind of battleground states, could that be a factor?
Yes, and I think in these battleground states, the people who live there have been battered by phone calls and polling, and just no one answers their phone anymore at all. They haven't answered their phone in months. So the people that are actually answering the phone are people who are very passionate about it, but those who are a little less so or a little more restrained in their opinion are not going to answer the phone, just don't want to be bothered by anyone. So we won't have that full perspective until we actually have the results.
And with polls, no one answering their phone anymore, they're moving online. What is the reliability of online polling? Is it reliable, or are there kind of flaws in the system?
I think online polling itself is a little flawed in that you can't really reach out to people. You kind of put out the message and wait for people to respond to you instead of actually seeking out people.
Additionally to that, the demographics of people who use online, just in general, online services, are very skewed to the younger, more liberal side of things. So older demographics don't really have the opportunity to even access these polls, so I think that skews it a little bit as well.
And that definitely does skew in the sense that older people do have higher rates of voting, and younger people it'll be interesting to see with the millennial generation, but they don't have the same reputation as far as voting goes. But now it's time to take a look back at the past few months as we analyze the past year's debates.
After a contentious primary season, Americans watched history on both fronts. Hillary Clinton becoming the first female to be nominated to a major party, and Donald Trump, an unlikely and untraditional candidate, blowing Republicans out of the water with polls stretching across the country. The first debate held at Hampshire University on September 26th continued the sense of tension between the two candidates on issues such as American prosperity and bringing jobs back to American workers.
But we have to stop our jobs from being stolen from us. We have to stop our companies from leaving.
That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business. We also have to make the economy fairer. That starts with raising the national minimum wage and also guarantee, finally, equal pay for women's work.
And the facts show that after the first debate, the polls placed Trump trailing Clinton by about 3 points. Polling expert Spencer Kimball says this is no surprise.
So the debate season was about 3 weeks, and going into the debates, we had Trump leading nationally by about 2 points. By the end of the debates, we had Clinton winning by 7 points. So you could certainly see that throughout the entire process, it hurt Trump by somewhere in the range of about 8 to 9 points. Some of this is not just the debate, but the debate fallout. His lean organization was not prepared at that time, and that caused him 3 or 4 days of negative press, which is what drove down his numbers after that first debate.
The debate was no stranger to poll tension and interruptions. The debate held in St. Louis quickly centered around sexual allegations against Trump from a 2005 video recording involving NBC's Billy Bush.
You called what you said locker room banter. You described kissing women without consent, grabbing their genitals. That is sexual assault. You bragged that you have sexually assaulted women. Do you understand that?
No, I didn't say that at all. I don't think you understood what was said. This was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it.
Following the second debate, Trump's polls trailed Clinton nationally by 7%. Both candidates were in the hot seat over policy, something viewers complained the debates did not touch enough on. The debate held in Las Vegas was central to rhetoric stemming from the Supreme Court and how candidates would act nominating a Supreme Court justice in the vacancy of the late Antonin Scalia.
But I feel that at this point in our country's history, it is important that we not reverse marriage equality, that we not reverse Roe v. Wade, that we stand up against Citizens United, we stand up for the rights of people in the workplace, that we stand up and basically say the Supreme Court should represent all of us.
Donald Trump, who has been a vocal opponent of Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland, did not bite his tongue in disagreement.
The justices that I'm going to appoint will be pro-life. They will have a conservative bent. They will be protecting the Second Amendment. They will interpret the Constitution the way the founders wanted it interpreted.
The third debate really honed in on policy differences between the two candidates, especially on immigration. Trump has been noted for his plans to, quote, build a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border and also to deport 11 million undocumented immigrants from the United States.
Now, here's what that means. It means you would have to have a massive law enforcement presence, where law enforcement officers would be going school to school, home to home, business to business, rounding up people who are undocumented. And we would then have to put them on trains, on buses to get them out of our country.
Though the debates are over, the controversy continues with polls rising among both candidates. It all boils down to November 8th. For EIV News, I'm Shayna Ferreira.
Now let's take a look at Jill Stein's foreign policy with a report from Ross Ketchke.
There on redirecting money from things like the nuclear program. You have proposed budget cuts to the national defense budget. Now, with the current international state being very toxic, let's say, very volatile right now, between the violence in Syria, escalating tensions with Russia, and the ever-growing threat of cybersecurity, with redirecting that money around, how do you plan to also keep America and our allies safe both home and abroad?
Great. So first, it's important to remember our current policy is not keeping us safe. It's actually endangering us. Not only that it creates more chaos and violence in the Middle East, but that violence blows back at us. And it's well known, a number of studies have shown that the main cause of sort of this ISIS-identified violence, which is not a formal connection with ISIS, it's just identification.
Inspired.
Exactly. The main source of that is actually the violence that's, and the bombs and the occupations, starting with Osama bin Laden. He was very clear that he wanted U.S. troops out of Saudi Arabia, and out of the Holy Land. So, this policy of occupation, of supporting dictatorships and tyranny for the sake of preserving our oil resources, this has been a disaster. That disaster is continuing. Where did ISIS come from? ISIS came from the chaos of Iraq and Libya. Thank you, Hillary Clinton for her part in that, particularly Libya, where she led the charge against the better instincts of many in the Department of Defense who were resisting it to start with. That's why Hillary Clinton, in my view, is as dangerous as anyone. She's absolutely as dangerous as Donald Trump to be in the White House. But we can have a different kind of foreign policy that stops these interventions, the violence, and the regime change, because that is what is making us not only endangered, but it's also devouring half of our discretionary budget. This is making us bankrupt, and that's essential for our security, to actually address our needs here at home and stop fanning the flames of violence overseas. We call for a foreign policy based on international law and human rights, not on brute military force. And the other thing is that we call for actually a real intervention, a new kind of offensive in the Middle East, a peace offensive in the Middle East. We're not talking about just throwing up our hands and walking away. We're talking about having a principled intervention. So number one, we start with a weapons embargo to all parties, because right now our weapons are winding up in the hands of all parties, and we are the major supplier of weapons to the Middle East. And we need to engage others, not only our allies, but also the Russians as well, who are also paying a very devastating price right now, both for terrorism, as well as they cannot afford their military budget right now either. Their economy is in deep trouble. So we need to productively engage, as many foreign policy experts are now recommending. We cannot have a world of U.S. domination, which used to be the kind of the paradigm, is that the U.S. would dominate the Middle East, we would dominate Asia, and everything would be fine. It's not worked out fine at all. We need a collaborative way forward. We need a way based on principled negotiation and finding common ground. We need to establish a weapons embargo, and we also need to put a freeze on the bank accounts of those countries who continue to fund terrorist enterprises. It's been established through many sources, including Hillary Clinton herself, that, as Secretary of State, that the Saudis are still the major funder of terrorist extremism around the world. So we can stop the funding, and we can stop the flow of weapons, and use our moral authority to really convene serious ceasefire and peace negotiations, starting in Syria.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Roz Ketchy. Now we're looking at some more results coming in from states like Ohio. We're seeing that, results are coming in favor of Trump by, more margins than we expected. You were earlier saying that, if he gets North Carolina, that could be the night we could be done. How do you think this all happened? How do you think this is playing out?
Well, just because we just heard that he might win Florida and Ohio, of course. So if he did both these, and they are very large states, and most importantly is Florida, you still have the Panhandle. So he's winning already. So when he gets to the Panhandle, he's gonna sweep the Panhandle for sure. And you have to look at time zones also. So I think if he won North Carolina, he's gonna win.
Great. And do you think there's any way that Donald Trump could take Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio, and somehow Hillary Clinton could still get to 270?
That's a good question. What I'm really interested in, and I'm looking at the results as they're coming in, what I think is really interesting is the percentage of votes that are being counted. A lot of the states that are leaning red right now, there's a sort of a small margin of the votes that have been counted. So there's still a lot of counting that needs to do, so I think we'll go late into the night.
Right.
But what I find really interesting here is that, and also what I'm interested in is which counties are being counted first. Because oftentimes Trump will be stronger in counties that are more rural, whereas Clinton will be stronger in counties that are in cities that have usually universities or a younger population, which she tends to do better with when it comes to voting. But it's really interesting to see how things are shaping up.
Now, does the socioeconomic kind of like the diversity of that particular state of Ohio I'm mentioning, does that play a role in terms of how the race panned out in that particular state?
Absolutely. And what I found interesting is I was looking at a couple of tweets, and Nate Cohn actually came out and said, that the white voters are coming out very strongly this year. So that could have explained why there's a little shift when it comes to the votes. But again, it's very interesting to see, and I think this race will go late into the night and as we were counting the different votes.
Now, you said the white vote is coming out very strong tonight, and we noticed that the early vote as far as African Americans was not as high as in previous years, but it was really, really strong in the Latino communities.
Right.
So how do we think this is in any way balancing out these results?
Well, it's not gonna balance the results, because if all these whites that were going to the rallies of Trump, and very few people did go to the Hillary Clinton, and we've always said that all those rallies don't matter, but it seems that this time we have to change the paradigm. Things seems to be different this time, so we can't expect people to wait in the rain for hours and walk for a couple of miles, like I heard yesterday on TV, and not go to vote. They're waiting for him for hours. So these people are gonna vote. These people did not factor in all these polls. And those polls, I doubt the samples of these polls, because samples in polls are extremely important. They were sampling more Democrats, for instance, and things like that. For whatever reason, they were doing that. So those polls are not really very accurate. So I always thought, when I knew what's going on with these polls, that, I mean, the way they are all over the place, that they're not going to tell us anything. Perhaps this time the rallies are going to tell us much more than the polls, because many of those that were following Trump from one place to the other, they were so enthusiastic. Not many people wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton because they are enthusiastic about her. You see, so perhaps the Democrat made a mistake to pick her. And they probably could have won if they had picked somebody else. But I don't know about Sanders. Sanders is great with the millennials and such. But it's very difficult for me to accept the fact that someone who calls himself a democratic socialist could win an election that easily, and the general election. So.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us
Yes.
tonight, Yakub and Vincent. Now, EIV reporter Moses Small is live in New Hampshire. What is going on over in the swing state, Moses?
Kelly Ayotte is a Republican Senate candidate from New Hampshire, and this race is as volatile as ever. Kelly Ayotte served as the governor from 2004 to 2009, and she's against Maggie Hassan, who's the current governor, who has a much more progressive platform. Voters had a lot to say about this election, so let's take a look into what they had to say right now. Kelly Ayotte is a Republican candidate for the Senate in New Hampshire. She served as governor from 2004 to 2009, winning the election to the Senate a year later. She's running against Democrat Maggie Hassan, the current governor of the state, who has a more progressive platform. Hassan opposes cuts to programs like Medicaid and Social Security. Voters had a lot to say about this election. Let's take a look. So how excited are you to come out to polls to vote today?
Very excited, seeing as I'm 20 and this is my first presidential election that I'm able to vote in, so very exciting for me.
I was more scared to not vote, honestly. It's a very important election, I think. It's the same as the presidential. I was really on the ropes on both of them. I won't talk about who I voted for, obviously, but I really was on the ropes, and it took me up until the moment I filled in the circle to really decide.
It's good to have a change. First female president, I'm actually excited if she wins.
There were distinct opinions among New Hampshire voters that made them support one candidate over another. They told us some of their reasons behind their choices in the polls.
Because I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like the way he acts, his manners, the way he feels about handicapped people.
Don't want someone who's going to cancel the Obamacare. That's why we're going to support them.
I don't like Donald Trump.
I'm just, Clinton's past. I just don't agree with a lot of things she's done, and I think I just don't trust her. I think he's a tell it as it is person, and I think he's a little bit more trustworthy than Hillary.
I'm in commercial construction, project management. We have problems finding people that are properly educated for it because our government's not stressing that. And I like his promise to make sure that people have good jobs and that the training is there so American citizens can go back to doing the jobs that we've sent overseas.
We've heard what some voters think, and according to the most recent polling, Ayotte is favored to win the New Hampshire Senate race over Hassan. But when things are this close, nothing is certain until we see these election results for ourselves. For EIV News, I'm Moses Small. We've heard what some voters think, and Ayotte is actually favored to win this Senate race over Maggie Hassan. And What we know for now is that nothing is certain until we can see these final results for ourselves. For EIV News in New Hampshire, I'm Moses Small.
Thank you so much, Moses. So New Hampshire, the race is tight between Ayotte and Hassan. It is also tight for the president. Right now, it looks like polling is showing, a Clinton lead, but, there are no guarantees. Where do you think New Hampshire will fall?
New Hampshire probably is the most unpredictable state in the union. So we'll have to really wait and see. Well, recent polls show that Trump is going to win in many. But now it seems that she's ahead, so New Hampshire is unpredictable.
And do you think that Senate race between Ayotte and Hassan could influence voters as far as the presidential ticket is concerned?
I think it's the other way around. I think the presidential race actually there had been a big impact on that race. And you actually saw Kayla Ayotte at some point distance herself from Donald Trump as well as from Bill Clinton. So it's actually the other way around.
But even in terms of the Republican Party, does that speak to the status of the GOP in terms of where we are with the party and how divided we're seeing them, especially in regard to the association with Donald Trump?
What I find really interesting is that Donald Trump is obviously doing very well in a lot of different states, and a lot of Republican, members of the establishment have actually distanced themselves. So there seems to be quite a big gap between the establishment and the public, because the public is turning out to be supporting Trump, more than expected by pollsters. So it's a lot of questions for a lot of people tonight, for sure.
Great, thank you so much. Now reports show Virginia going to Hillary Clinton. With more on how that will shape out the race, we have Paul Ross.
All right, so Virginia, one of those states that's a battleground state that both Trump and Clinton were looking to win. It was a toss-up at one point, then it leaned Hillary, and then it went back to a toss-up. But tonight, we can go and call that Virginia goes to Hillary Clinton. 13 electoral votes. It's very good for Clinton herself to go and win that state. Now, the reason Virginia has become such a Democratic state before, as it was considered a Republican state, has to do with who is coming to Virginia. Now, a lot of people are moving to Northern Virginia from Washington, D.C., becoming Democratic voters and adding a Democratic base to the state. Now, both 2008 and 2012 went to the Democrats, and in 2016, we could add Virginia to the Democrats as well. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. This year's ballot specifically features not only bids for the presidential election, but heavily disputed questions, especially those 4 ballot questions that we were looking at. So Brian Danoff explores that a little more for us.
Massachusetts voters face some important questions this election day. 4, to be exact. First, whether the state should be allowed to issue an additional slots license. The second ballot question, one that asks to expand charter schools, is arguably the most contested of the 4 measures.
Question 2 on the November ballot will ask voters if they allow giving the state the authority to lift the charter school cap. As it stands, no more than 120 charters are allowed to open up shop in the state. There are currently 78 charters in operation.
A yes on question 4 would legalize recreational marijuana in Massachusetts, something that 4 other states have already done.
From my perspective, I think marijuana was miscategorized decades ago. It shouldn't be in the same category as cocaine or heroin or other types of drugs. And I personally don't think it's more dangerous than alcohol. I definitely don't think it's more dangerous than cigarettes are to your health.
No matter the outcome on Election Day, one thing is for sure. Massachusetts will be very different from the day before. For EIV News, I'm Brian Danoff.
Thank you so much. Brian is joined with us in studio. So other states have had some form of legalizing marijuana on their ballot as well, whether it be medicinal or recreational. How do you think that, Massachusetts votes could compare with the rest of the nation, or could this start a whole sweep to legalization of marijuana?
Yeah, well, I think it's been definitely an interesting question this entire campaign. Certainly legalizing recreational marijuana has been strongly supported in Massachusetts. As was mentioned in the package, it is a very, if alcohol is legal, why isn't marijuana legal? That's what a lot of people believe. They believe it is not nearly as harmful of a drug as alcohol is. Apparently, it looks pretty good for question 4's standing. It looks like this will pass, and recreational marijuana will be legalized. So we'll have to see how that will affect the economy, how that will affect the social aspect of the state. And yeah.
Massachusetts, home to Boston, big college town. How will colleges handle the legalization of marijuana should it get passed in Massachusetts?
Well, again, it's important to remember that colleges are under federal law, so marijuana would not be allowed on campus. This is not affecting any colleges, or at least it shouldn't. Obviously, college students they use marijuana, but obviously this won't be any more tolerable in college. It won't be expected. This is it's a very controversial issue, but again, I think once it's legalized, again, this is a movement that's spreading across the country. We'll probably see many more states voting on this measure for future elections.
But even looking towards the criminalization, I mean, you're looking at a number of, especially younger voters that tend to swing toward this kind of a new movement in this particular state, being a very democratic state. But do you think that even looking at it on the surface, it may sound great to some voters, but when you look at the layer of legalization and also criminalization, I mean, there's some layers to that in terms of incarceration levels. Do you think that is also something that may or may not have been considered?
Absolutely, that's one of the biggest parts of this question is that there are just too many people in prison on these small drug charges relating to marijuana. That's the perspective of many people who are voting yes on question 4. This was a thing that Senator Bernie Sanders brought to light during the primary, that there are just tons of people in jail, primarily minorities, who are going to jail for having small amounts of marijuana, and the funds that are being used to fund these prisons, private and public, they could be used somewhere else, according to those people. So, certainly mass incarceration is a big reason why legalizing marijuana has gotten so popular. It's just a way to get people out of prison who are not dangerous criminals.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's check in with Ross Ketchke and Christina Gesford live in New York. How is it going in the city, home to 2 of the campaigns, Ross and Christina?
Welcome back to us here in New York City. My name is Ross Ketchke, and I'm standing alongside my colleague Christina Gesford, and we're going to have a quick update on the latest numbers that we have for you. Christina, what do we have?
All right, so right now we're looking at Trump having a lead in the electoral votes over Clinton. CNN right now is saying Clinton has 122 and Trump has 167, but that varies over different outlets. Also, breaking news, CNN just predicted that Trump would take Ohio. That's a key state in this race.
Absolutely, and Donald Trump has spent a significant amount of time campaigning in Ohio, not just over his whole campaign, but specifically in the last 2 weeks, really trying to reach out to the large coal mining community, their community that was hit very hard by the recession back in the mid-2000s, and that Donald Trump's promise of bringing jobs back to that region has made him a very, very popular candidate. We'll be giving you guys more updates as the night goes on, but for EIV News, I'm Ross Ketchke.
And I'm Christina Gesford.
Back to you at the desk on EIV News.
Well, poll results are still coming in. Now we're looking at a big win in terms of for Hillary Clinton. We're seeing a big state. What is that state?
Colorado. So, Paul, can you give us an update on how that will impact the rest of this election?
So, Colorado, 9 electoral votes. It's gone Democratic in 2008, went Democratic in 2012. It's a good thing for Hillary Clinton that she won this state because it's another battleground. She was in the earlier part of the night losing a bunch of battleground states, and now that she's gaining more, it gives her more confidence going into the later parts of this election. She's got California coming up. That's certainly going to go Democratic, and it'll be a closer race as we get along to the night. Now, this is going to be a very long night. So, Colorado's gone much more progressively than it has been in the past, especially because of many gun measures that have taken place in the state through a lot of gun violence that has happened. Therefore, Colorado going to Hillary Clinton, no surprise. However, it's another battleground, and she should be very happy winning that state. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Paul. We're joined again by Christina and Dylan, and we have some updates that the New York Times now has Donald Trump at a 91% chance of winning this election. This is quite frankly unprecedented. How do you think this is all happening? How do you think the polls really missed the mark so much when we thought it was going to go to Clinton by a pretty, decent amount?
I think right now, in with that number, we have to keep into consideration that this is just a prediction based on not full election results. And we have seen some states flipping, so to not fully rely on that number, but it is very striking, especially at this point in the night.
What do you have to say?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think it's too early to call it yet. You know, we still haven't even made it to the West Coast. A lot of those states are really blue, especially California and Washington and things like that. So Hillary still does have a chance, but this is alarming news, to say the least.
There are pivotal states out on the West Coast, California, with 55 electoral votes, the big state. So, you know, that could add to her, that will likely add to her should it go Democrat like it is predicted. But, you know, there are other states out there. Nevada is a bit of a toss-up. So, you know, do you think, could Nevada be one of the states that sort of, you know, it all lies in its hands?
I think definitely. I think what Hillary Clinton needs to do tonight, and it's something her campaign has been working on for the last few months, is that she needs to build her own coalition and make sure that they actually make it to the polls. You know, Obama did a very good job of that in 2008 and 2012, and with this election cycle, a lot of people have been so dissatisfied with the candidates and just the aura of how this election coverage has been going. So I think if those young voters, if those Latino voters, if the African American, the female voters all come out tonight, she still has a chance.
Yeah. What kind of last-ditch strategies can Clinton be using at this point?
I think for her right now, especially like we see in Nevada that Trump is up at 55 right now in the current polling that we have now. But in California, she really needs to concentrate and make sure that she has all of her things focused there. Right now, she's waiting. But I think just trying to like inform her supporters that there is hope and that she can indeed possibly take this and not having everyone just kind of go to bed and wait it out till morning, I think.
All right. Great. Thank you so much. And now we're going to go back to Paul with more on how these numbers are going to be affecting the Electoral College and to see if Trump will beat Clinton to 270.
Paul?
So right now we have another state to call. This is the first one that actually changed from 2012. We've got Ohio going to Donald Trump. 18 electoral votes. Right now he leads 168 to 109. This is a big win for Donald Trump. Now the reason he won Ohio is because of Ohio's anti-trade policies. Now, a lot of people in the state are very anti-trade. They're very anti-NAFTA, which Hillary Clinton has supported, and they're also very anti-TPP, which Clinton recently did not show support for. However, Trump has shown his lack of support for that trade agreement. Now, this being the first state going for Donald Trump that is a win for Republicans, this gives him more of an opportunity to go and win this election and pretty much shock the world. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Paul. Out of 4 ballot measures in Massachusetts this year, the 4th question has caused the most controversy. Now let's catch up with more on that on question 4.
Voters in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have 4 ballot questions to answer in addition to voting for president and congresspeople. Ballot question 4 asks whether the Bay State should legalize and regulate marijuana for people 21 plus. Polls have this race as a dead heat, easily going either way. And as Mark Lachese explains, there are 2 groups of opposers.
Sort of have 2 groups. The Massachusetts Medical Society, made up of, the Society of Physicians in the state, opposes it, primarily on the grounds that there hasn't been enough research done, because full legalization of marijuana in the United States is so new that there's not enough research done. We don't know whether fully legalizing marijuana would be a public health problem or a public health issue. And then there are people who, another group of people very strongly feel that having a pot shop in your neighborhood is just not good for your neighborhood. Is not good for the quality of life of your neighborhood.
And while there are many who will vote no on question 4, many will vote yes, like Manisha Gelman.
I certainly hope that it will pass, and I'll be candid about that. I think that there is real need in the U.S. for reform on all aspects of war on drugs policies, and I see the legalization measure as being integral to that.
Experts from across the state have their own opinions about if the state will legalize marijuana. However, Gelman explains the impact if the measure is enacted.
I mean, I think that they'll react the same way that voters in other states have reacted. So in Colorado, there were many people that were for legalization and other people who had real concerns about it. Some of those concerns have bared out, and other ones have been assuaged by the reality of implementation. So I suspect that the same will be true in Massachusetts.
It will be very interesting to see if Massachusetts voters go green on Election Day. For EIV News, I'm Paul Ross.
Thank you so much, Paul. You're now joined with us here, an expert on question 4, also an expert on the Electoral College. It looks like Florida might be going to Trump. This race is quickly becoming Trump's. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's very interesting that we've got Ohio going to Donald Trump. That was the big shocker so far. Now, if more states like North Carolina, like a Florida, like a Michigan, like Wisconsin could go to Donald Trump, then it'll be a real referendum on this nation, because in 2008 and 2012, Barack Obama had fairly safe wins. Now, it looks like it's going to end up being close and we're going to be here for a long night. However, with Trump winning in Ohio, it shows that anything can really happen. And this was going to be a shoo-in for Hillary Clinton, and even she thought so at the beginning. Now it just looks like Trump is going to go and shock the world.
Now, what do you make of these particular numbers? Because again, we keep talking about this unprecedented race and how many people from both sides of the party are not expecting this to happen. I mean, what do you make of those poll numbers coming in, and not just in Ohio, but we've seen Colorado come in, we've seen that we've seen Virginia come in. Where does that speak to?
I think it's interesting that for the battleground states, you have to win 75% of those in order to win the presidency, because there are obviously going to be certain states, like Texas is obviously going to go red. California is obviously going to go blue. So when you have these battleground states that can flip-flop in elections, like the largest one being Florida, and then you've got Pennsylvania with some uncertainty as to where Pennsylvania will go, we're pretty sure that Florida is going to go to Donald Trump. You got to think that a lot of people, when they go to these opinion polls, are not really telling the truth. We saw that happen in 2015 in the United Kingdom. A lot of people were saying how they were going to go vote for one candidate, and then they ended up actually voting for another. So in this situation, a lot of people were probably afraid to go and say to these pollsters that they were going to vote for Donald Trump, and instead silently went into the polling stations and actually went to go vote for him.
Thank you so much for that. The House races are also heated up. Here's Lindsay Perdue with an update on what's going on over there.
With all of the House seats up for election, Emerson College professor Spencer Kimball talks about battleground states and what they mean for Congress.
So I don't think that the Democrats will be able to win a majority in the House. They'll win back a few seats, but they'll still be the minority party most likely. There's a lot of competitive races on both sides. I think one that's really got a lot of attention is right above the border. Jean Shaheen is running against, Carol Shea Porter is running against Frank Gunta in the 1st District in New Hampshire. Ginta has had a lot of problems on financial issues. So that's a race that the Democrats are looking to take that seat back. There's a race down in Florida, the 18th District. Patrick Murphy is now running for the U.S. Senate, opened up that race. That's a competitive race. Out in Utah, forgot the woman's name, a Republican having a tough race there. So we're beginning to see a lot of difficult races, but not enough that's going to swing the Congress. There's other races like in California where you have Democrats facing Democrats because they have an open primary system. So regardless of who wins those races, it'll stay within that party. And so you might see a shifting of the seats, but it won't be any changing of the parties.
This year's House election plays a big role in the division of the House in determining what laws will be made under our future president. For EIV News, I'm Lindsay Perdue.
Thank you so much for that, Lindsay. We're joined again by Christina and Vincent. So now taking a look, it looks like Donald Trump, has a clearer path to the presidency than Clinton does. So say the House does go blue, how will that impact his ability to accomplish his goals?
If the House does go blue, which it might do with these upcoming states, it'll create an intense gridlock. And so we won't be able to get anything done, unfortunately, which may be a good thing, depending on what the government wants to do. But they definitely will see the same thing we've had in the past few years.
And how do you think Donald Trump will respond to being gridlocked? He's a bit of an unpredictable character. Do you think that's something that he'll, kind of move on passive-aggressively with, or will he sort of just take into executive actions?
Well, I think it's going to test out the institutions. The institutions will have to sort of adapt themselves, or maybe people will adapt. Well, there's going to be tensions between institutions on one end and then personality on the other. And Donald Trump will be bringing a very bold presidency compared to other previous presidents. So it's going to be interesting to see how institutions react in order to make sure that they remain productive.
Now, we were looking earlier at some of those New York Times projections, and we have a new percentage coming in of over 90% in terms of a clear path towards a Trump presidency. What do you make of those numbers?
I think they're credible. And actually, Hillary Clinton posted on her Instagram just a while ago, sort of an image where she said that she was proud of her team, whatever happened. I'm sort of paraphrasing what she was saying, but she's clearly laying the groundwork for potential defeat. And this is a really telling moment when a candidate will go on Instagram and sort of try to sort of ease into maybe a potential loss. That's very telling.
And now we're even looking at, the AP just projected just a few seconds ago that Trump did take Florida. What do you make of those numbers?
I think Florida was something that everyone was waiting for to see, and it was a very close race. I know it was neck and neck for a lot. So I think now that he has taken it, it's a huge hit for a lot of people who were hoping Hillary would take that state, and that would lead to her possibly taking a few other states.
And if Trump wins, what kind of reform are we going to see in the Democratic Party? This is an election that they kind of thought they had in the bag, but it went to an outsider from the Republican Party. How will they have to reshape their strategies going forward?
I think for both parties, actually, with an outsider coming in, they'll have to reshape their strategies. And a lot of senators who are coming in, hopefully, they kind of rode on the coattails of Hillary, so they'll have to reform their entire ideal going forward because she won't be in office.
And what do you think, in 2020, when the Democrats throw up a new nominee potentially, what are they going to have to look for differently that, Hillary Clinton didn't have?
I think the operating word will be messaging. I think Donald Trump's messaging was extremely on point, very clear, very simple, and people grabbed onto his message, whereas for Clinton, the messaging was a bit more complicated, not easily accessible to everyone. I was asking to everybody, for example, what were the positions of Hillary Clinton on key specific issues, and a lot of times people could not articulate those positions, whereas for Trump, very simple. It fits in a tweet, so people understand.
Great. Thank you so much. Coming up after the break, we'll check in with reporter Ross Ketchke live from New York City. Don't turn away.
This is EIV News Election 2016. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and online at EIVnews.com. That's going to do it for this episode of The Box Score. Thank you so much for joining us. We are now going to be taking questions at our press conference immediately. Tough. It was a good show this week. Talent played well. Can't tell you the effect that Tommy had on us all the way up and down the rundown. Very impressed this week with the crew. Did all their work inside and outside of the locker room and inside the coaches' suites. I think we have a good chance next week against Syracuse before we take on Missouri. Then we'll get a little bit of a bye when we take on Ohio at the end of the month. But starting the right, do we have any questions? Anything? Anyone in the middle? Anyone at all? Typical.
Oh, hello, Boston. Didn't see you there. Oh, are we rolling?
From the studios at Emerson College in Boston, EIV News presents Election 2016.
Welcome back to EIV News Presents Election 2016. I'm Shayna Ferreira.
And I'm Maddie Crichton.
Well, Trump is only 73 votes away from becoming the next president of the United States. Completely unprecedented. We now go to our map correspondent. Paul, what do you have for us?
The most recent updates we have is Virginia and Colorado going to Clinton and Ohio going to Trump. So Ross is going to explain, or Paul Ross is going to explain all of this for us.
All right, so 29 electoral votes going to the state of Florida, the Sunshine State. Now, this is another big win for Donald Trump. It's another upset. Although Trump considers Florida to be his second home, this is another big win for Donald Trump. Now, Florida and Ohio going to Trump really means the Democratic Party, if it ends up losing this election, is going to have to go check itself. Because in a lot of situations, we thought that the Republican Party was going to have to go check itself because Hillary Clinton was expected to win and win by such a large margin. However, if this continues to go and if Florida and other states keep going to Donald Trump, then we'll have to go and see what happens with the Democratic Party and see if they ended up making a mistake by having Hillary Clinton win the nomination. So, Florida going to Trump, it's a big deal. He'll go and say that. Going back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Paul. Now, the Detroit Free Press is saying Michigan will go to Clinton. We're waiting for more confirmation on that, but that is a big, big win for Clinton if she gets Michigan. It was a swing state, and at first it really looked like it would go to her, but there were some points, you know, as they were bringing in all the votes, it was pretty up in the air. So do you think this could sort of steer Clinton back on the path to victory?
Yes, I think after our most recent results, it brings her back kind of in the playing ground, brings her up a little bit more from 7% predictability of winning. And I think we waited so long because Detroit is such a hot city there and has so many college students that we had to wait for that full count to come in before we could claim it as hers.
And California also in 55 votes for Clinton. That is the biggest state in the Electoral College now being thrown to her. So that is a big win. It was predicted. We did think California would go to Clinton, but do you still think that it is the push that she needs right now?
Well, she needs more than the push. She needs a major shove in the right direction. I mean, it's not. I mean, the path is not looking good for Clinton. And the call by the Detroit Free Press is only the Detroit Free Press. So the major nets have not jumped in and made that call. So we'll wait to see if they're right. But it's looking increasingly difficult for Clinton to get to the magic number and win the presidency.
But even looking at, like, if there is confirmation of Michigan, and we are seeing some level of confirmation from California, what more would she need to kind of be back onto the same
She
boat?
needs a lot more.
Right.
I mean, she's behind in North Carolina. She's behind. She just lost Florida apparently. So she needs a lot more votes to be able to sort of muster enough votes to be able to get to the presidency. But so far, it's not looking good. And major, and you know, the New York Times is also saying that the path is narrowing at a very fast pace.
And even, you know, when this election is called, many people predicted that this election will be called by 9 p.m. It's currently just about 11 o'clock. I mean, how far can this go now that we're seeing this unprecedented shift in terms of the polling?
I think we're just going to have to wait it out until the very end. I think we have to wait till all states are almost at 100% because there are so many different things going on. We want to make sure we're completely certain as to the result before you make any rash decisions or rash understandings of what's happening.
Great. Thank you guys so much. And now we go to reporter Ross Ketchke live from New York City. What is going on in the capital, where it's all happening in New York?
Ross Ketchke here live again in New York City as huge news breaking in Decision 2016. You can see behind me there are dozens of people lined up outside a popular restaurant, and they can see on the TVs through the windows that Hillary Clinton has just won all 55 electoral college votes from one of the most important states in the country, that of course being California. Now those 55 electoral votes have gotten her within inches of Trump. This race is now closer than ever. The current numbers we have here on the ground in New York are 190 Clinton to Trump's 201. Now, this race has been close to the bitter end since both candidates were narrowed down in their fields earlier this summer. We knew this was going to be a bitter race to the end. This is one of the most divisive presidential races in history. Huge news breaking again. Hillary Clinton has indeed taken California along with all 55 of its electoral college votes, while Trump was able to secure most of middle America, including important states Texas and Wyoming. Clinton taking many states west of the Mississippi, including New Mexico, Colorado, and that all-important California. Now, here in the East Coast, still waiting for a few official states to come in, such as Georgia and North Carolina. We're going to give you those numbers as soon as we have them. Again, behind me, you can see more people excited that Clinton is taking California. We'll be back with you with more information as soon as it becomes available. For EIV News, I'm Ross Ketchke, live in New York City. Back to you at the desk.
Thanks so much. Donald Trump has had a variety of celebrity endorsements during his eventful campaign from Washington, D.C. Emily Tanaka has more. Oh my God, I'm about to throw up.
Many high-profile celebrities have publicly endorsed both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Some of these endorsements have the potential of swaying voter opinions. Clinton has had a celebrity-heavy campaign this election, featuring some of her most prominent star-studded endorsers along the campaign trail. It began with the pop star Demi Lovato performing at a Clinton rally in Iowa back in January. Katy Perry has also jumped on the Clinton bandwagon, showing her support for the Democratic candidate at rallies and even at the Democratic National Convention. After a last-minute endorsement from Jay-Z and Beyoncé, Clinton ended her campaign with a bang by featuring John Bon Jovi and Bruce Springsteen at her final rally in Pennsylvania. Trump has gone on record saying that Clinton's use of celebrity endorsements is a, quote, form of cheating. However, he too has many high-profile endorsements, the most prominent being Patriots quarterback Tom Brady. He also has support from former athletes Hulk Hogan, Dennis Rodman, and Mike Tyson. As the election has progressed, Trump has also gained support from Republican politicians Ted Cruz, Sarah Palin, and Paul Ryan. Despite the seriousness of this election, both candidates have been heavily endorsed by celebrities, but will any of these endorsements make a difference for the presidential election? Tonight, we'll find out. For EIV News, I'm Emily Tanaka.
Thank you so much, Emily. So now Tom Brady and Giselle, it's kind of unclear who they voted for. Giselle said on Instagram, no, we did not vote for Trump, but Brady hasn't said anything. And that was really kind of the ally that Trump had as far as that duo is concerned. How do you think these celebrity endorsements have helped or hindered Trump?
Yeah, well, you know what? Coming into tonight, I thought that, it's never a bad idea to have Beyonce and LeBron James on your side. But as we've seen tonight, it looks like that just did not help her, and she had so much mainstream celebrity support. You looked at guys who were supporting Trump. You had guys like Mike Tyson, actor Scott Baio, Lou Ferrigno. The celebrity firepower just wasn't really there for Donald Trump, and yet he didn't really end up needing it. It appears that there was a huge surge in turnout for white voters, and for many of them, they probably didn't care too much if Beyonce or LeBron James or Jay-Z were speaking on Clinton's behalf. Another thing to remember is that what is also astounding is that President Obama campaigned for Hillary so much, and Michelle, and campaigned just as much as he might have done in the last stretches of 2012 and 2008. So it's kind of appalling that the President of the United States, everything he said, might go by the wayside.
And Carly, what do you think of all this? That Clinton sort of had the surrogate stronghold, but it doesn't look like that really did much for her.
Yeah, I mean, she had Obama, she had Katy Perry, Beyonce, all these people, but the people that were backing her weren't the people that she needed the support from. She already had the millennial vote, she already had the female vote. These weren't the celebrities that were really convincing anybody of anything new. They were already, making the voters that she already had feel stronger.
Yeah, and this is not to say that Ted Nugent is what won Donald Trump this election, but I think it's just important to note that, as much as celebrities may speak on a candidate's behalf, a lot of people maybe just, they don't, what their favorite singer tells them to do is not what they will do. They're separate. The celebrity world, the political world are supposed to be separate. Maybe now with Trump being elected, or potentially being elected, that might kind of cross over, but it's very interesting, the amount of celebrity support she had and how it may be all for naught.
It's definitely bleeding over into the major battleground states, and we're looking at, you know, a projection coming from North Carolina that what did go to Trump. That's telling. It's very telling. I mean, what
she
do you
did
say about
spend
that?
a ton of time in these battleground states, whether it be her, Tim Kaine, Obama, Michelle, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. Like, the list goes on of people she had on the ground campaigning for her. But it seems that at the end of the day, people might have been listening more to their peers, to people they knew personally. And if those people were voting for Trump, then, you know, then they too, you know, could be influenced to vote for Trump, and that these big surrogates, these big endorsements may not have helped her as much as she wanted. But also, you know, could it be who's voting and, you know, who was targeted to vote? A lot of ad campaigns, you know, that weren't even done by these candidates themselves. You know, you see celebrities make their own. Joss Whedon did one with a ton of stars. Rachel Bloom does one with a ton of stars, and they all urge people to go and vote, specifically in that case for Hillary Clinton. But again, could they be missing their audiences? Could they not be, you know, aiming at the right audiences?
I mean, it could just be a fact of people seeing these celebrities want the celebrities to stay out of it. They don't want anybody like celebrities to have any part in their political process. So it could have turned some voters even the other way, or turned them off, like, whatsoever.
Great, thank you so much. And here's Paul Ross with an update on polling throughout the nation.
As we said, California now goes to the Democrats, it goes to Hillary Clinton, but we can add another state for Hillary Clinton. She wins the northern neighbor to California, which is Oregon. Now, Oregon's is 7 electoral votes. It's a good state for her to win. It was very likely for her to win. So if you add 7 to what we have, 190, so it's now 201 for Trump and 197 for Hillary Clinton. It is very close. Now, this election reminds me a lot of the election in 2000, where George W. Bush was considered to be an outsider, and Al Gore was the insider, and a lot of people thought that Gore would have won. However, Bush ended up winning. Now it's controversial how he won. However, it's still very close. What's going on is very similar to what's going on now. So there are still big states left. We don't know yet who is going to win. With the addition of California, it helps Hillary Clinton a lot. She needed that to go and gain some momentum. And for later states like Washington with 12 electoral votes, like Michigan with 16, like Pennsylvania with 20. This is a big boost for Hillary Clinton. Now, in my opinion, whoever wins North Carolina, that's 15 electoral votes. It's a big state. Whoever wins that state will likely win the election. Now, apparently we're going to go to Moses Small in New Hampshire.
Right, we're now going to toss to Moses Small at the headquarters of the Hassan campaign in New Hampshire. Moses, what do you have for us?
Behind me, filled with people. The winning polls have her just over 10,000 votes behind Kelly Ayotte, but at the same time, you wouldn't know that from the feeling in this room. I don't think that people are very deterred. No one is really convinced that this race is won yet because it's still a toss-up. And so even though Ayotte may be 2 or 3 points ahead in the most wide of polls, it's really anyone's game still, and we're really seeing that now.
Nevada. Right, so it looks like that North Carolina is going to Donald Trump, another 15 electoral votes in his basket, but it does look like that Clinton just got, was it Washington State? So right. A bit, you know, probably a bit of a balance there, but still Trump is leading those electoral votes. He is leading in most projectiles and percentages by a really wide margin. So
right, and even looking towards that, we also have something from North Carolina, which is also pretty big. And here's reporter Moses Small with how Trump's business history has affected this particular campaign.
Donald Trump might be the world's most famous businessman, which makes his campaign for the United States presidency so unique. However, if Donald Trump's business policies foreshadow the way he would govern as a president, the country would experience a very interesting 4 years. Trump has made a fortune throughout his business career, although how much money he's made and how many taxes he's paid are up for debate. Spencer Kimball explains that Trump's business career has affected his poll numbers as a presidential candidate.
Trump has been a TV personality and has a different audience and a different following than a traditional candidate. And I think we saw that a lot in the polling, in maybe underestimating some of the turnout numbers of the type of people that would support him.
In past elections, when a candidate has a shady past, voters inevitably stop supporting such a candidate. For instance, Mitt Romney's not-so-clean business record led many undecided voters to choose Barack Obama rather than Romney in 2012. However, Hillary Clinton's past had not been the cleanest either, allowing Trump to create and keep a political base, as Kimball explains.
His base is never going to leave him. He's banking on that base. It's around maybe 10, 11 million people. Again, he needs 66 million votes to win. So he's got a strong base of about 11 million fans, followers. From that base, it's probably closer to about 24, 25 million that are solidly with him.
Interestingly enough, Trump's key followers don't necessarily include fellow business people, but rather white men between the ages of 35 and 54 with mixed economic backgrounds. In fact, many of Clinton's top supporters include Wall Street bankers who normally would vote for the Republican candidate. Mark Lucchese explains more about the nuances of Donald Trump's business career.
Trump has indeed made a lot of money as a business person, and he filed, as is required, a financial disclosure form to run for president. It's 92 pages long, and as is required, you have to list what businesses and companies you have the financial stake in, so that all of us can see if there may be conflicts of interest or that sort of thing. He has a financial stake in a really large amount of businesses, and were he to become president, this would become a significant issue.
While Trump's business career is unprecedented, knowledge of how his career impacts the presidency is vague. However, Lucchese explains the one policy Trump would implement as president.
The only economic measures he's talked about with any specificity, I mean, he talks about bringing jobs back to the United States, are tax cuts, especially of the top tax rates, of the top marginal tax rates.
On November 8th, the world will be watching to see if the United States turns Trump the businessman into Trump the president. For EIV News, I'm Moses Small.
Thanks so much. We're now joined in studio once again by Vincent Reyno and Christina Safford. Now, what do you make of Trump's business history? Because he's been criticized repeatedly for trying to attempting to run a country like he would run a business. But do you think that this is panning out in his favor at this point in regard to the polls?
It clearly had some appeal. And what's interesting is that comparing it to business is very appealing to the public because they can actually visualize his promises and his engagements. There's a tangible sense to it, whereas for Clinton, maybe the message was not as tangible and as appealing to the public. But what I find really interesting, I'm looking at the turnout, at the results, is that there's a big difference between different sites. Or if you go on the New York Times and if you go on other sites like CNN, there seems to be a difference when it comes to results. But so far, I think we can all agree that the path is getting increasingly narrow for Clinton to win, and Donald Trump is in a very good position to win the presidency.
And even
as far as Donald Trump's business is concerned, for some people that was a really, really big pro for them. They liked Trump Industries. They liked all the things he did. But for people who were voting for Clinton, it had the opposite effect. Can you talk to that, Christina?
About the Trump industry itself?
Yeah, all the enterprises and sort of the discrepancies, the criticisms that have gone.
Right, so I think Trump himself, his name is his industry, his image is his industry. We see Trump Towers, we see he has a clothing line, and a lot of things that he does is very, if you look farther into it, it contradicts what he said. So he's all about bringing jobs back to America, whereas his own clothing line, the Trump tie and suit, is made in China and Bangladesh. So there are two things that he just isn't really going by his word in what he's doing.
But clearly here, there's this appeal to this kind of business base, and he hasn't really lost his base in terms of, especially the high white voter turnout that was unprecedented in terms of this election season. Do you think that that fact alone can stand in terms of creating a clear guide for a Trump presidency?
Absolutely. I think at the core of it, he is an entertainer. We've seen it with The Apprentice and with his TV shows as well, so he can use that to appeal to everyone and to also appear like the fear tactic and making sure that he can get everyone's opinion on that.
Do you think that Trump's position as a businessman outsider now is paving way for people like him who were just businessmen or maybe related in any other field outside of politics to now join the political scene?
Absolutely, and there's actually a candidate up in Canada that actually sort of is actually attempting the same thing that Trump is attempting to. So he's positioning himself in a way to eventually challenge, the Canadian Prime Minister. So I think the model of Trump will be mostly replicated in the U.S., but I think it will also have an international appeal that we shouldn't discount.
Great. Thank you so much. And Trump's treatment of women has been a major issue this election, especially since the Access Hollywood audio leak. Let's take a closer look at how Trump's history with women might affect this election with reporter Moses Small.
The first presidential election where a major party's candidate is a woman. The subject of women has been one of the more controversial ones during the 2016 campaign. However, the controversy comes from Donald Trump and his history with women, which is very mixed. Marco Chesi explains how Trump's history with women has affected gender politics.
The polling numbers are showing that Trump is having trouble with college-educated women who are normally more reliably, as a group, as a large group, more reliably Republican.
As Lucchesi points out, because of the things Trump says, many women will refuse to vote for him. However, there's a certain segment of the female population who will stand by Trump no matter the scandal.
There are certainly a large percentage of women for whom all the revelations about Trump and women hasn't dissuaded them from being loyal Trump supporters, and I'm sure who will vote for him on Tuesday.
Whether it be the Access Hollywood tape or the various sexual assault allegations, Trump's poll numbers continue to fluctuate, unlike 2012 Republican nominee Mitt Romney, as Spencer Kimball explains.
In 2012, they were all pretty consistent in the last 10 days. Everybody had Romney up from a point to Obama up by 5 points, but everything was in that 6-point range, with the majority of them leaning towards Obama. Obama ended up winning by 4. I think the real clear average was like 1. So he exceeded the average, but it was all relatively uniformed. This time, we just saw a poll yesterday that had the AP poll that had Clinton up by 14 points, and we saw the Business Journal poll that had it at 1 point. We've seen a bunch of different polls out there that have a huge spread and makes it really difficult to decipher what's happening. I think once again, you're looking at this 18 to 34-year-old voting bloc, and they're shifting their vote between Stein, between Trump, between Clinton, and depending on the time of day and the day of the week that you're making these polls, making the calls to collect the data, that's what's influencing the results.
In such a wacky election, a presidential candidate using vulgar, sexist slurs has become the norm. However, if that candidate becomes president, the new norm will certainly be interesting to witness. For EIV News, I'm Moses Small.
So Trump's history with women definitely been a very contested point. How do you think this has influenced? There's still, you see that group of women who say, women for Trump, women for Trump. Why do you think this hasn't influenced the way that they're voting?
I mean, we've seen a lot of people, a lot of conservatives who are voting for Trump, who are women, saying that, how people treat women doesn't make a politician. They cite Bill Clinton as one example. They cite John F. Kennedy as another example, that just because, you might not treat women favorably doesn't mean you can't make good political decisions, which, who knows?
And what do you think about him boiling all of this down to locker room talk?
Well, I mean, certainly, we heard a bunch of professional athletes immediately come out and say, look, this is not what you hear in the locker room. It is still, politics aside, it is astounding that a man who made these comments might be elected president. That being said, again, a lot of Trump's comments that were considered controversial, that were considered offensive by the left, just didn't seem to faze his supporters. Most of his supporters, I would say, once he clinched that nomination, back in the spring, they were on the Trump train for good, no matter what he was going to say, because they so strongly oppose Hillary Clinton and her establishment politics. So, although what he has said about women, I don't think anyone could logically defend. I think there are certain points where that just does not matter to much of Trump's supporters.
But even looking towards that, I mean, you're seeing, a lot of his base really appreciates and respects him for, sort of speaking to what they wouldn't be necessarily comfortable with saying in public. I mean, he just comes out and says things pretty irrationally, some people would consider irrational behavior. but somehow it has an appeal to the American people from all coasts and from every single state. I mean, we're seeing these large productions, we're seeing these large margins. Could this political correctness really be playing right now?
I mean, yeah, a lot of conservative voters are saying Trump's saying what we're all thinking, which frankly is a little bit horrifying for a man who's going to have his hands on the nuke. So, who's to say?
Right. And let's now go to our Ross Ketchke for a live update in New York. Ross, what's going on?
I'm Kate Bell, and this is Erin Crowley, and we are live just blocks from the Javits Center, where excited Clinton supporters are gathering to watch this tight race.
Absolutely. Clinton is picking up states that her campaign was anticipated to pick up, and states like Oregon she just picked up. And to give you guys a quick update on the numbers, Hillary Clinton has 197 electoral votes at the moment, and Donald Trump has 216.
Wow, it's really close. We're so excited. We are right here by the Empire State Building.
The streets of New York are filled with supporters. Everyone's all around. You can see the Empire State Building in the background behind us. It is lit up red, white, and blue for the election.
We are so excited to be here for EIV News. I'm Kate Bell.
And I'm Erin Crowley.
All right, now let's check in with Paul Ross for an update on polling across the country.
So, with the addition of North Carolina, Donald Trump's lead now grows to 19 points, 216 to 197. Now, I said earlier that whoever wins North Carolina has a legit chance, probably the best chance at winning this election. And I still agree with that. I think that Donald Trump is probably going to end up shocking the world by winning this election. Now, he wins here by 5 points, 15 electoral votes. It's a really big win for Donald Trump and for his movement. Now, there's still other states. This election is certainly not over. We've got Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes. We've got Michigan with 16. Washington State still has not been called yet. It's 12 electoral votes. It's likely going to go to Clinton. You've got Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes. But also, you've got states like Georgia, 16 electoral votes, and it's looking like that's going to go Donald Trump. However, with this wacky election, we never know what's going to happen. Back to you guys.
Thanks so much, Rob. We're now joined in studio once again by Vincent Reno and our lovely, lovely analyst right here. What can you tell us about these numbers coming in?
I think it's increasingly worrying for the Clinton camp. You can just feel their anxiety all the way here. But I feel like there is a very narrow path for her to still get in this contest. Like we were talking about, she does have to win Pennsylvania, some of those other states like Michigan and Wisconsin. But at this point, I think Trump is most likely going to take it home unless something miraculous happens.
Well, we're even looking at polling numbers here, and we're seeing that even in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, Clinton is ahead by 90,000 votes. Now, could this make it or break it?
I don't think at this point, I don't think it's a numbers game. I think it's a county and reporting game. The spread in the different counties from which the votes are coming. So at this point, I don't think we should focus nearly on the numbers, but we need to focus on where the votes are coming from and see if there's some extra votes, either for the Trump campaign or either for the Clinton campaign, because the Trump campaign needs to muster up some votes as well to be able to gain a bit of traction. So at this point, again, I'll concur with my colleague here and say that it's not looking good for the Clinton camp, and it's looking tremendously good for the Trump campaign.
So with the Trump victory, very likely now, what do we think the Republican Party's reaction will be to this? We've had Republicans, give him their support, but a fair amount also say this is a candidate I don't want to endorse. So how will they respond to their win, a win it seems they maybe didn't quite want?
I think the Republican, it's going to be a stunner for a lot of people in the United States. It's going to be a stunner for obviously the Democrats, but it's also going to be a stunner for the Republican establishment because they've been openly fighting the Trump candidacy. Paul Ryan came out and said that he would not, he would not protect Donald Trump whenever he was making a mistake on the campaign trail. And now with Donald Trump winning, this is a clear message to Democrats, but also to establishment Republicans, and that's a huge, huge message tonight.
I would also agree. I mean, you look at some of the important and influential Republicans around the country, John McCain, Ayotte in New Hampshire, who have these very complicated relationships with Donald Trump, how they've tried to both stay with him in their party, but also stray away from him so that they could focus on their own political pursuits. And I think in the future, that's going to be the balancing game that this party has to go forward with, because they can't completely stray away from Donald Trump, because that would give the Democratic Party too much power and influence, especially as the underdog party for the next 4 years.
And, you know, Trump is sort of this outsider. He is, you know, not part of the establishment. You know, do you think Bernie Sanders might have done a better job against against Trump, my bad?
I think it would have been a completely different race. You know, with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, a lot of their appeals was for the same demographics, those working class white voters who did not like this establishment politics going on.
Great, thank you so much. Now, lately, Trump has been visiting a lot of battleground states. Let's take a closer look at what's been happening in his final days of the Trump campaign.
Ross Ketchke here for EIV News. I'm standing in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, just steps outside of the White House, where just in the next few months, a new president will sit. Will it be Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton? We're taking one last look at the final days of the Trump campaign to see how he plans on swaying last-minute voters away from Hillary Clinton and to his own campaign. For the second day in a row, Donald Trump visited 4 states in a last-ditch effort to sway undecided voters. On Monday, Trump sat 3 points back in the polls as he visited Michigan, as well as 2 of the most important states in the election, Ohio and Pennsylvania. In Ohio, the infamous swing state, Trump spoke to a crowd of supporters at the J.S. Dorton Arena. The GOP candidate has campaigned heavily in the state throughout this election season. This could be Trump's most important state to win, as no candidate has won the election without taking Ohio since 1964. Trump also visited supporters in Scranton, Pennsylvania, another important state with 20 electoral college votes up for grabs. Aside from North Carolina and Pennsylvania, Donald Trump has also spent a significant amount of time campaigning in the Granite State of New Hampshire. His success at those rallies in Scranton and Raleigh will be crucial to his campaign, as both of those states carry an enormous weight in the Electoral College, making them crucial for his campaign's victory. I'm Ross Ketchke in Washington, D.C. for EIV News.
Unprecedented, Maddie.
A very unprecedented final days of campaign, clearly very successful. We also had Melania's anti-bullying speech, which a lot of people found to be quite hypocritical. Her candidate has been, her husband has been accused of being a bully himself. Yet on Friday, I believe, or Friday or Saturday, she had this long America is too mean a country kind of stance. It's a very, very interesting tactic to sort of take the blame off of her husband and to then, put it on the country as a whole.
Right, and it speaks to that security in the base. I think that both Melania and Donald Trump understand that base and understand that no matter what the polls go or where the numbers are, I mean, he's still going to have his backing. And I think that just speaks to the extraordinary amount of support that he's been getting since the beginning during the primary season. We've seen that sweep in New Hampshire, and now we're here on Election Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we feel like it came to these final days when really, early on, we sort of had this big Trump support. But Hillary Clinton has been involved with politics for most of her life. So let's take a look at her history and what led up to her being our candidate tonight.
Hillary Clinton, First Lady, New York Senator, Secretary of State, and now, maybe, President of the United States. The Democratic nominee began her political career as a Republican, campaigning for Barry Goldwater in 1964. After hearing a speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she was inspired to work in public service and became a Democrat in 1968. In 1974, she became a member of the Presidential Impeachment Inquiry Staff, as she advised the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives during the Watergate scandal. Hillary and Bill Clinton wed on October 11, 1975, forming the most powerful political couple in history. Bill Clinton was elected Arkansas governor in 1978. As First Lady of the state, Clinton chaired the Arkansas Educational Standards Committee, co-founded the Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families, and served on the boards of Arkansas Children's Hospital and the Children's Defense Fund. Bill Clinton was elected the 42nd President of the United States in 1992, and Hillary served as one of the most politically active First Ladies in history, pushing for health care reform and expanded child care, as well as helping create the Office of Violence Against Women in the Department of Justice. With Bill's second term coming to an end, Hillary decided she would seek the New York Senate seat of retiring four-term Senator David Patrick Moynihan. She defeated Republican Rick Lazio by a wide margin of 55 to 43%, and Clinton became the first wife of a president to hold public office and the first woman U.S. Senator from New York. She was re-elected in 2006, but had her sights on another first, becoming the first woman president. However, she lost the 2008 Democratic primary to Senator Barack Obama, but when Obama was elected president, he named her as Secretary of State. She focused her efforts on women's rights and human rights, and became one of the most traveled secretaries of state in American history. Right before leaving office, Clinton's State Department came under fire after a deadly attack on a U.S. diplomatic post in Benghazi. An independent panel deemed that there were, quote, systemic failures and leadership and management deficiencies at the State Department. She released a memoir in 2014 titled Hard Choices, sparking debate as to whether she would run for president again in 2016. That she did, announcing her candidacy in April 2015. Clinton preached pragmatism, calling herself a progressive who wants to get things done. After a heated primary and generally close results in most states, Clinton never relinquished an overwhelming lead in superdelegates, and thus clinched the nomination in early June. Clinton's campaign was and still is marred by the FBI investigation into her use of a private email server as Secretary of State. That being said, Clinton is regarded as the most qualified candidate to ever run for president after over 3 decades of public service.
No matter what happens tonight, Hillary Clinton has been one of the most experienced presidential candidates to ever run for the position. We'll see if she continues her political career in the White House. For EIV News, I'm Brian Danoff.
Thanks so much. And here's Paul Ross with an update on the polling results across the states. How's it going, Paul?
Well, I want to talk about 2 states. I want to talk about the state of Washington, and I want to talk about the state of Pennsylvania. Now, the state of Washington, 12 electoral votes, usually goes very liberal. That has not been called yet all the way on the left coast. And we've got Pennsylvania still not called yet. We'll go back to Washington. Washington with 12 electoral votes. It's a big, very important state. It's growing, with Seattle becoming a very booming city. And then we got Pennsylvania here. It's a very, very important state for the future of this country. Now, it's going blue right now. However, it's not been called. We've got reason why it hasn't been called yet is because there are 3 counties in the state that do not have results yet. However, it looks like Hillary Clinton will win that state, and it's the biggest state left with 20 electoral votes. So if she could win that, it'll make this election a lot closer, and it will also make a Donald Trump victory a little bit less likely, even though right now we think that that is possible. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Paul. So now let's just take a look back at this Electoral College, because it really, really is just something we didn't expect. And I know it's kind of been a really reoccurring theme tonight. How did this happen? But, you know, if we do look at the states, you know, that Clinton could still clinch onto, you know, what do you think is going on in the minds of the Clinton campaign right now? What are they feeling, and how much, you know, pressure do they feel to get these remaining states?
I mean, I think we're obviously seeing a lot of pressure on the Clinton campaign side. As for Pennsylvania, it was supposed to be leaning extremely blue at the beginning of the day. Now we've seen it's gone closer and closer to a 50-50 split. So I think as far as Pennsylvania goes, Clinton's campaign is definitely going to be depending on Philadelphia voters and on Pittsburgh voters to really come through for if they want to win the blue.
And what do you have to say?
And, you know, people praised Hillary Clinton throughout this campaign for how prepared she is and how rehearsed she is. I'd be stunned if she has a speech prepared right now to accept a presidential loss. This is unprecedented. Again, there is a chance, for football fans out there, this is like a Malcolm Butler interception in the Super Bowl kind of chance. She needs something to just break suddenly. The things are not looking good. There is still that final push she can make, but I think people at the Clinton campaign headquarters right now at the Javits Center in New York City, they were looking to shatter that that proverbial glass ceiling. It might stay untouched.
And, you know, we had, Barack Obama. We saw him in Pennsylvania just days before the election. Do you think that maybe that could help Pennsylvania go in favor of Clinton?
Oh, definitely. They had huge campaigns all over different colleges and universities. They had Anne Hathaway coming to different school campuses. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and even Hillary were all there. But Trump was also there, and he pulled a crowd equally sizable at all these universities. So honestly, it really could go either way at this point. We're seeing Hillary's currently still predicted to take the state, but it's a toss-up. It's very close.
I think in a lot of these polls we're looking at just numbers and specific counties, but it's also really important to kind of look at demographic-wise. I think even though yes, we expected a large turnout for minority voters, like the Latino vote and the African American vote, even evangelical Christians was a big one in terms of the Midwest, but we're really starting to look at the racial distinctions with voter turnout and how massive of a margin that turnout was for this particular election. I mean, this is really what's turning it out. I mean, we talked a little earlier about lower black voter turnout and a very high Latino voter turnout, but again, we're not seeing that balance pan out as many Democrats and even some Republican analysts really projected. I mean, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, conventional wisdom, I mean, as if that matters in this election right now, but conventional wisdom typically says that when there's a high turnout in general, Democrats win. There has been a high turnout, but Donald Trump is right now the overwhelming favorite to be elected president, and I think just the country, all the polls, underestimated the ability for white voters to get up and vote in droves. Coming into today, the focus was on the chance for Clinton to have the highest turnout for Latino voters in American history. That still might be the case, but there was just a huge surge with white voters, white, male, not college-educated voters. So that has made the difference, as we hoped it would this election, and as we expected it would. So, something to look out for.
All right, thank you so much, Brian and Carly. Once again, we join reporter Ross Ketchke and the Green Party candidate Jill Stein to learn more about Stein's plans for student debt.
And I know that's one of the biggest policies that you're running on, is forgiving America's student debt. And a question about that, there's an estimated $1.2 trillion in student debt, and you referenced the major Wall Street bailout back in the late 2000s. With a national debt of currently roughly around $18 trillion, how do you plan on affording to essentially buy out that extra $1.2 trillion in student debt in addition to our national debt?
So there are several ways that we can pay for that debt. One of them would be to redirect the money. Right now there's $1 trillion that's going into creating a new generation of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons should actually be abolished. We should be really intensifying efforts for nuclear abolition instead of resisting them, which unfortunately our current administration and the past many administrations, Democrats and Republicans, have been very much a party to this new nuclear arms race. According to Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, we are at the most dangerous moment ever in human history in terms of the potential for nuclear war. So there's every reason to be backing off. $1 trillion going into a new generation of nuclear weapons under the current administration. How about instead we just redirect that money to a new generation of young people, not a new generation of nukes, but a new generation of young people who deserve to be bailed out. It always takes the vision and the genius of the younger generation to remake our economy. Right now they're missing in action. They're held hostage in debt. They've got two hands tied behind their back. We need to liberate them to lead the way forward. So redirecting this disastrous nuclear weapons project is one way. Another way is let's tax Wall Street. Let's tax the crooks that we bailed out, who crashed the economy through their waste, fraud, and abuse. This is the only sector of the economy that does not pay a sales tax. A small 0.2% sales tax on Wall Street transactions would generate close to $400 billion a year. We could have the student debt paid off within a year or two. And remember, this is an investment into the stimulus package of our dreams, because we're talking about 43 million people who already have the skills, they have the degree, they have the training. They need to be turned loose so that they can take the risks to create the small businesses, the nonprofits, the worker cooperatives, so that they are actually creating the economic engine of the economy of the future.
Absolutely. You touched.
Great, thank you so much for that, Ross. So now we look at Jill Stein's student policy on, student debt, paying all that back, and it isn't that far off from what we saw from Bernie Sanders in the sense that it just really shouldn't exist and should be eliminated. So do you think that the Democratic Party is really going to have to take the forms Bernie Sanders had, or just go a more progressive route in general if they want to continue to win elections after tonight?
Oh, absolutely. This is a defining moment for the Democratic Party. We thought this would be the unraveling of the Republican Party with a Trump loss, but with a Trump win, this says a lot about the direction of the Democratic Party going forward. They essentially handpicked Clinton to run. No, she was not running. She was running unopposed until Bernie Sanders joined the Democratic Party from being an independent for his entire career. A lot of people latched on to his progressive politics. People considered it idealistic. Say what you want about it. He got a lot of support, and a lot of that support did not immediately jump to Secretary Clinton. It took a lot of convincing, and there's likely a lot of voters, a lot of Bernie Sanders voters, that didn't vote for Clinton today. And that will say a lot about what the Democratic Party stands for now and what it should stand for in the future.
Especially if you look at the state of Florida, a very, very close call, within percents of each other, but yet, it has like 2% going to Gary Johnson. Could the fact that people who were voting for Bernie Sanders went third party be Clinton's downfall?
I mean, I think that could definitely be part of it. A lot of people just weren't ready to give up all the progressive policies that they got with Bernie to go with Hillary. They were still dead set on their student loans and dead set on a lot of other extremely progressive policies that Clinton was maybe a little anxious to fully pick up. So.
But even looking at that, I mean, Jill Stein is not too far off from what Hillary Clinton would pose. I mean, she's really looking at tax breaks, and she's saying that if we gave, Wall Street a break, we should be able to give, students a break. If we, if you teach your child to swim, you don't just throw them in the water, you teach them. So like before, if public education is free for a high school diploma, we should offer that same road, which is basically what Hillary Clinton at this point is saying. She said it at a much more complicated level, which I question now is probably the downfall in terms of her communication style.
Yeah, a lot of people considered this stale politics, and I keep thinking about President Obama speaking so much on Hillary Clinton's behalf. A lot of people, even Democrats on the left, were not and are not happy with President Obama. So seeing him continually speak for her just represented that you would be getting more of the same from Hillary Clinton. At least that's the impression that came off to probably a lot of voters tonight. This is a transformative moment for the Democratic Party. If they do not move left, if they do not get more progressive, they are not going to gain back these votes that they lost to third-party candidates. They're not going to come back to this party. The Green Party will grow. The Libertarian Party will grow. People remain independent. It's a big deal.
All right, thank you so much, Carly and Brian. We now go to our MAPS correspondent, Paul Ross, one last time to look at how many electoral votes each candidate needs to take the election.
Well, right now, with Donald Trump adding Georgia 16 electoral votes, it's a huge win if he wants to get closer to 270. Right now, we have him at 232, just 38 votes away from winning the presidency, with Hillary Clinton at 209. She needs at least 61 votes to win. Now, there are some states that have not been called yet. We've got Pennsylvania with 20 votes. We've got Michigan with 16. You got Minnesota and Wisconsin, 10 each. These are all states that Hillary Clinton can win. It's not over yet, and it's very close, and we're going to be up all night. Back to you guys.
Great. Thank you so much. Out of the 4 ballot measures in the Massachusetts this year, the 4th question has caused the most controversy, but now we know that question 4, marijuana, has been legalized in the state of Massachusetts. So let's catch up with Paul Ross on what's going on with question 4 to get to this point.
Voters in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have 4 ballot questions to answer in addition to voting for president and congresspeople. Ballot question 4 asks whether the Bay State should legalize and regulate marijuana for people 21 plus. Polls have this race as a dead heat, easily going either way, and as Mark Lachese explains, there are 2 groups of opposers.
Sort of have 2 groups. The Massachusetts Medical Society, made up of, the Society of Physicians in the state, opposes it, primarily on the grounds that there hasn't been enough research done, because full legalization of marijuana in the United States is so new that there's not enough research done. We don't know whether fully legalizing marijuana would be a public health problem or public health issue. And then there are people who, another group of people very strongly feel that having a pot shop in your neighborhood, you know, is just not good for your neighborhood, is not good for you, you know, the quality of life in your neighborhood.
And while there are many who will vote no on question 4, many will vote yes, like Manisha Gelman.
I certainly hope that it will pass, and I'll be candid about that. I think that there is real need in the U.S. for reform on all aspects of war on drugs policies, and I see the legalization measure as being integral to that.
Experts from across the state have their own opinions about if the state will legalize marijuana. However, Gelman explains the impact if the measure is enacted.
I mean, I think that they'll react the same way that voters in other states have reacted. So in Colorado, there were many people that were for legalization and other people who had real concerns about it. Some of those concerns have bared out, and other ones have been assuaged by the reality of implementation. So I suspect that the same will be true in Massachusetts.
It will be very interesting to see if Massachusetts voters go green on Election Day. For EIV News, I'm Paul Ross.
Thank you so much, Paul. So now that it is legalized here in Massachusetts, you know, what do you see being the sort of the next steps? What kind of, you know, rules will be made within this new legalization?
I would say that this is probably not a surprise for a lot of the country. Massachusetts has always been a very liberal-leaning state, so I think that legalization is one of the first steps. I think something that has also been talked about a lot with marijuana, we've been talking a lot about the decriminalization aspect of it. You know, a lot of people are in jail at this point because of these low offense crimes, and I feel like marijuana in general is something that younger voters are very passionate about.
Right, and I think a lot of it is about mandatory minimums and not having those because there are so many people in jail because of that. But in terms of kind of the cons of this vote, we have seen, like based on Colorado studies, that a lot of people have been in tragic car accidents because they've been high while driving, which might be an issue here in Massachusetts because the drivers here are relatively not very safe as it is. So to have them intoxicated at the wheel would be a little more dangerous, as well as just the infrastructure in Massachusetts. We don't really have enough infrastructure for a T right now, so to have them try and work towards like legalizing it and making a huge profit out of the marijuana industry would be really interesting to see them try and do.
But even looking towards that, I mean, you see, you know, a number of opponents of this will say, well, if you know it does pass, then are you going to release, or is the criminal justice system willing to release every person that has been, you know, incarcerated on a marijuana charge? I mean, when you look at the numbers at this point, now what it has been approved, I mean, it's a valid argument. I mean, would that pass, or would that even be a consideration in this political climate?
I think in this day and age, especially if Donald Trump does become president and Massachusetts currently has a Republican governor, I'm not sure it would be likely to be seen on the ballot anytime soon because there are no really politicians advocating for it unless we see someone like Elizabeth Warren or some other high-profile Northeastern politician really push for it in these coming years.
Yeah, and looking nationwide, as we spoke about the decriminalization of marijuana, do you think another state legalizing it could sort of get rid of this like kind of stigma that marijuana has, that it is a hard drug on the likes of cocaine?
Yes, I think it's on a lot of ballots right now. It's including New Hampshire. I'm not sure what they voted actually, but I think if people in the neighborhood all have the same opinion on it, and as few politicians work towards making that work for the system and bringing those people out of prison who have been wrongly incarcerated for it, I think we can make some progress. But again, what Dylan said, I think it will take a few years and maybe people settling into the law before we move towards making that change.
I mean, again, you kind of touched on, you know, having a Republican governor. I mean, Charlie Baker is known for his policies, of course, in this point of the race. I mean, you've seen his race with his Democratic rival. Even that, looking forward, I mean, is that, you know, having such a liberal agenda passed in the state of Massachusetts under a Republican governor? I mean, what does that mean for the state?
Does it mean we're sort of looking at, you know, we agree more with the policy that's always been, or sort of who we've elected now? Are we trying to counteract potential actions he could be taking, or?
I think it really does show just how unique some of these northeastern states are, with the fact that there have been these split ticket voting where you see people who will eagerly support Elizabeth Warren but then also elect Charlie Baker. And I think that a lot of their policies are very similar and very palpable to that moderate type of socially liberal but a little bit economically conservative voter that's very prevalent up here. And you saw the same thing when we're looking at New Hampshire. A lot of those voters were the key to sort of change that election right now.
Right, and now also looking, we have a Republican governor right now. You know, should we get Trump as president, do you think Massachusetts will try to change its own local politics, go more left, maybe elect a Democratic governor next time around, just to sort of, you know, control what they can within their own state if it is a Trump presidency?
Yes, I think so. I think if Trump is elected president, a lot of states will kind of like pull back and retract from that, and then look for a Democratic president. I think if they are a Republican candidate for governor, they'll have to really work towards balancing with Trump and making sure they appeal to a wide range of voters.
And I think going off of that, I think it's really important because Charlie Baker was one of the first elected Republican officials to actually disavow Trump and stray far away from his message. So it shows, especially since Hillary Clinton did win this state, that Trump is not the most popular figure here.
Mm-hmm. And it is interesting to look, so Baker was one of the first people to say, I am against Trump, but he also never was moved to being pro-Clinton. He voted for everything on the ballot except for president. He left that slot blank. So what do you think that says of our governor, who even in a pretty liberal state can't be pushed to vote for the liberal candidate?
I think it just shows that he's supporting his party for the most part. I think if he were to call out and vote for Hillary, it'd be much bigger news. I know in New Hampshire as well, Ayotte wrote in Pence instead of voting for either one. So I think a lot of politicians were put in a very hard place because they didn't want to show support for either candidate.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and even like going forward for the GOP, I mean, what's the future of the GOP
nationwide? Exactly. What
just,
do they do with Trump holding the top office?
They're just stuck between a rock and a hard place here.
I think they're going to become in a new, it's going to be a system of reconstruction in the next few years. I think they're going to see a whole new wave of what the GOP is, as well as the Democratic Party. I think the entire governmental party system is now changing.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this historic night. Make sure to tune in next Tuesday at 9 Eastern Time for the latest in New England news. I'm Maddie Crichton.
And I'm Shayna Ferreira, signing off.